pitch that we love? It might sound like an odd question, but pitches can be different sizes with big consequences. Why is that? And what are the actual rules? Back when association football started, pitches could be up to 100 metres wide and 200 metres long. That's longer than Ellen Road. Not the pitch, the stadium. Anyway, UEFA wanted a standard across Europe for international matches, which became 105 metres long and 68 metres wide. But some clubs had been rebels, not intentionally, but because of the stadiums. Take Highbury, for example. It was 5 metres shorter and a metre narrower, meaning away sides had a challenge to adjust. White Hart Lane was exactly the same. And actually, when Spurs temporarily moved to Wembley, they asked the FA to shorten the pitch. The FA, very offended by the sacrilegious suggestion, said no, which in fairness could have actually benefited Tottenham because when they moved into their shiny new stadium, the pitch was exactly the same size as Wembley's. Today, Forest Pitch at the City Ground is a big one. It's 2 metres wider than any other pitch in the Premier League. But the smallest of all, Craven Cottage, just 100 metres long and 65 wide. No excuse for not tracking your man. There are a couple of crazy outliers in Europe too. At Napoli's home ground, the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona, the pitch is a whopping 110 metres long. At least they don't play on a slope like Newcastle do. There's a 2-metre incline on the pitch at St James's Park. And don't get me started on the old pitch at Yeovil too. It used to be a slant of 2 metres corner to corner and across the halfway line. So UEFA have their standards. So do the FA, but they do give pitches in England some wiggle room. Pitches can be anywhere between 90 and 120 metres long and between 45 and 90 metres wide. I mean, the rules state you can't have a square pitch, but in theory you could have one that's 91 metres long and 90 wide. Imagine rocking up to play a Sunday League game and the pitch is basically a square. So there are rules and regulations on sizes, with a UEFA standard that roughly everyone follows. But as we all know, size doesn't matter, does it?
Good evening, how are we? You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT. I'm your host, Max Scott. Alongside me is the one and only Rory Jennings. We've got an absolute belter of a few hours coming your way. It looks like Benjamin Sesko's chosen Manchester United over Newcastle. So is that the right choice for him to reject Champions League for a side that their own manager has called the worst in the club's history? And what next for Newcastle? Where on earth do they go? We'll be joined by the Daily Mail's chief football reporter and the man who broke the bombshell Alexander Isak news, Craig Hope, to get the latest on who on earth the Magpies will turn their attention to now. The latest on Alexander Isak and why on earth all of their targets are shunning them. And if Liverpool do get Alexander Isak, as we all expect to happen at some point, is this the best squad on paper in the club's history? Liverpool legend Mark Lawrenson seems to think so. I'll be getting Rory's take on that. We'll also be getting the latest from Rory's Chelsea, my Nottingham Forest, and of course the Championship returns this Friday live on talkSPORT. We'll be giving our predictions ahead of that opener between Ipswich and Birmingham. All that and much more. Get in touch as well. We want to hear from you. 03717 223344. This is the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT. Mr. Rory Jennings, how are you, mate?
Very well, sir. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm trying to get used to these new air things.
I know, I like it. It's nice in here. It's glamorous, isn't it?
It is. The carpet's fresh.
It's beautiful. It's really well done. And yeah, it's a joy to be part of this new studio, new look talkSPORT. It's dazzling, isn't it?
It is.
Slightly intimidating. I don't really necessarily ever want to see myself in such high definition. Not ideal.
I'm slightly concerned because I've had a poor few days for the skin, actually. And I feel every pore is going to be exposed, as well as our footballing opinions.
Nowhere to hide now.
For the next 3 hours.
Anyway.
Well, look, there's only one place to start, Rory, and it's this Benjamin Sesko news. talkSPORT understands that the Slovenian, the 22-year-old Slovenian, has made it clear that he wants to join Manchester United. Leipzig, we understand they're set to accept this offer from United of 65 million plus 8 million in add-ons, which is about 5 million less than what Leipzig offered, which I think sort of I don't know. The boot is in Newcastle even more because they've bid more, and they're not going to have that accepted. Ultimately, is it the right decision for Sesko to choose Manchester United over Newcastle, who are in the Champions League next season?
Yeah, to be totally honest with you, Max, I don't really see it as even a conversation point. As a prodigious young centre forward who has his pick of clubs has chosen Manchester United over Newcastle United. Like in other news, water is wet. Of course he's chosen Manchester United. There isn't a world where anybody, given the option of Newcastle United and given the option of Manchester United, should choose Newcastle United. I don't really understand why it's a debate. The only thing, literally one metric that you could say choose Newcastle would be the fact that they're in the Champions League this year.
Do you not think that would be? I mean, evidently it's not in Benjamin Sesko's case, but do you not think that would be quite an important factor for a footballer, that they want to play in Europe's elite competition, and he won't be doing that if he chooses Manchester United, as we understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Champions League could be a deciding characteristic if it were a toss-up between Manchester United not in the Champions League and Arsenal in the Champions League. Manchester United not in the Champions League, Liverpool in the Champions League. I think that could be enough to be a differentiator in those circumstances. But being offered the opportunity to play for Newcastle or Manchester United, you simply have to choose Manchester United. Like everything about Manchester United, the history of the club, what the club represent, the icons that have worn the shirt, the success, even in recent years, even in this past decade, which is apparently, well, certainly the worst in the Manchester United era Premier League-wise. And it's comparable to the worst that they've ever had. They still win trophies galore. They still win European trophies. Like it wasn't that long ago that Paul Pogba scored for them in Sweden and they won the Europa League. Like for Newcastle, that'd be the greatest day in their history. For Manchester United, it's considered a bad season.
There's no doubt, though, that it's an absolute gut-wrenching sickener for Newcastle, who seem to, throughout this entire summer window, bar Anthony Elanga and bar Aaron Ramsdale, who ultimately got relegated with Southampton last year, they've not been able to get who they want. I mean, list off the names.
Oh, no, I mean, the list...
Brian Mbeumo. So where do they go from here?
No, you're right. And when you play that game, when you do just try and list off the players that they haven't been able to get over the line, it really is endless. It really is. You go Mark Gahey, they didn't get him. James Trafford, they didn't get him. Brian Mbeumo, they didn't get him. Liam Delap, they didn't get him. João Pedro, they didn't get him. It's literally endless. And I think that this is a signifier. Look, I like the city of Newcastle. I love the North East. My wife is from that neck of the woods. I really do. But when it comes to a footballing conversation, there seems to be this myth. And it's a myth that's perpetuated by everybody. It's understandable why Geordies think it, because Geordies are supposed to think it. Everybody in the country sings, we're by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. And we know it's not true, but that's what you do. You think your club are bigger than they are. You think your club are better than they are. So with regard to Newcastle, it's completely what they should be doing. But there seems to be this myth within media. We all conform to it. When people, even on this station, talk about Newcastle United as a sleeping giant, they're not.
Those words came out of my mouth.
Exactly.
I think they're the 9th most successful club in the 92. And so for me, the idea that Newcastle aren't a massive club,
they're not
is ridiculous.
They're not, though. They're not. Like even in my relatively
I'm not saying they're the same as
lifetime.
Manchester United, Rory, but you've got to admit that Manchester United, as it stands, their own manager has said this is the worst Manchester United side in the club's history. And in fact, I want us to hear, because Simon Jordan earlier this morning, he did not hold back on what he thinks of Manchester United.
I think that Man United has all the appeal that we know it has, but it has all the challenges. That it's a mess. It's got fans that are protesting the first game of the season. It's got people that aren't performing at levels. It's got people that is an exodus of players that are supposedly top players that don't want to be there. They've got a manager that pees all over it every time he possibly can. You've got owners that no one likes. And you've got the huge pressure and expectation of a club that does carry all that legacy. So there's lots of reasons why Manchester United is not, shouldn't be the given choice.
It goes without saying, Manchester United are a bigger club than Newcastle, Rory. I'm not trying to argue that. What I am saying is it's clear Manchester United currently, in terms of the grand scheme of their grand history, are in a really difficult scenario. And you could argue, and I think you should argue, that this summer they've taken steps in the right direction. And I hope that Ruben Amorim is the person to sort of lead them back to what we expect from Manchester United. But when we talk about Benjamin Sesko, is it the right move for him right now as a 22-year-old who's only scored 13 goals in the Bundesliga last season to go into a club that has a track record of buying players for a lot of money who then fail?
Max, he has to take the opportunity of leading the line for Manchester United. It would be such an unambitious move to go and play for Newcastle United when the opportunity for you to lead the line at Manchester United, to hear your name sung by the Stretford End, it's there for you. You can't possibly turn that down. Maybe you're correct. Maybe Manchester United are going to have another woeful season. Maybe. But there's also a chance that even in their woeful season, they still win silverware. They still qualify.
And they've shown that. I'm not denying that, by the way. And I'm not predicting that Manchester United will have a woeful season. What I'm saying is, where the clubs are at the minute,
so
they are worlds apart.
Okay, let's explore it from the other end then. My feelings on this are, obviously you sign for Manchester United if you can sign for Manchester United, and it's almost a non-starter for a conversation. I just believe Manchester United are the option that you have to take. What are you suggesting here? That maybe Newcastle, considering the direction of the club, the brilliance of the manager, the ambition of the owners, maybe Benjamin Sesko should turn down Manchester United? Do you genuinely think that there's even an argument for that?
I certainly think there's an argument. Look, I can understand why he signed for Manchester United. They're arguably the biggest club in this country. They're one of the biggest clubs in the world. I'm not denying that at all.
And you may never get the opportunity again. That's the other thing with football.
Well, he's 22.
But you may never, ever get the opportunity to lead the line for Manchester United again. And if you were to turn that down in your career and then look back on your career, and maybe you've had a good career, but you've probably never played for a club bigger than Manchester United. I just don't see...
Well, he hasn't, yeah.
No, but you know, when he retires, if, say, he does turn this down, ends up going to Newcastle, scores goals for them, and then who knows? You probably will still have never played for a club bigger than Manchester United because there's a finite amount of them out there. I just don't see how you could turn it down. So let's rationalise it. You decide to choose Newcastle based on what?
Based on the fact that they have Champions League football next season, that they've got a wonderful manager. They've just achieved, their first domestic trophy since 55, something like that. Yeah. And this is a club that has a huge amount of backing that probably needs a few years in order to get themselves right with PSR, and then could easily challenge at the very top of the country. However, this summer, I think it paints a totally different picture. And so I'm not saying I can't understand why Benjamin Sesko has chosen Manchester United, but unlike you, I think that there is a conversation because of where Newcastle United are compared to Manchester United. But let's focus in on Manchester United, because we're going to talk with Craig Hope a little bit later. I thought that Manchester United's approach this summer, which I think is the right one, is Premier League proven. Mateus Cunha, Brian Mbeumo, who have done bits in recent seasons for their respective clubs. And now they're going for someone that scored 13 goals in the Bundesliga rather than an Ollie Watkins, who is Premier League proven and scores more goals than him.
Yeah, I think though we can make sense of this. So they did need Premier League proven players. I think apart from Mason Mount in the past 5 years, they haven't signed anybody from the Premier League. Like, I don't think it's worked for anybody that they've signed. You think of all the players that have come in with no Premier League pedigree that ultimately have been non-starters. Terrell Malacia, Andre Onana, Rasmus Højlund, Xerxes up front, Ugarte, like the list goes on and on and on. So they've recalibrated a touch. They've gone and they've signed Premier League players with a proven track record of scoring goals in this league. That's in now. The front two are in. I think you then can amend a touch and go and sign a young, prodigious player who has bags of potential. Like, whatever you think of Watkins and the guarantee that Watkins will bring to Manchester United, I think he's quite underwhelming for Manchester United.
But what I don't understand is how you can say Benjamin Sesko is overwhelming.
Because Ollie Watkins, we know the level that he can get to. It's decent. It's a good Premier League player, but it's a decent level. With Benjamin Sesko, there is a chance that it doesn't work. Of course, you're correct. But there's a chance that he goes on to become one of the best centre-forwards in Europe. And therefore, that is what this is. They're buying the potential and they're marrying up the potential with the proven players that they've already signed. I think it's good strategy.
Time will tell. Right, listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes, 18+, begambleaware.org. Next up, me and Rory are going to try and get to the bottom of what is going wrong at Newcastle. Good evening, you're listening to the Transfer Insiders here on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings. We've been discussing Benjamin Sesko's decision to choose Manchester United over Newcastle. Rory Jennings, and look, I do agree with you, mate. I can understand exactly why he's done that. We're going to be continuing a deep dive into Newcastle in a moment, but first we're going to head over to the Emirates, where there is that friendly between Arsenal and Villarreal. Ian Abrams is there.
And now gone Arsenal 1, Villarreal 2. The Villarreal goals in the first half scored by Nicolas Pepe on his return to the Emirates, and also by Carl Etta Eyong. Christian Norgard, who scored for Arsenal, was withdrawn at half-time. There's going to be multiple changes now on the hour mark for the Gunners, but we have seen the best effort so far from Victor Gyökeres a few seconds ago, right-hand side of the area. Shot that was saved by the goalkeeper, who kept it out and palmed it away. Arsenal 1, Villarreal 2. Arsenal pushing for an equaliser.
Ian, can I just, obviously a lot has been made of Victor Gyökeres signing for the Gunners, and he played for about 12 minutes, and, you know, people jumping on that. You know, what have you made of his performance so far?
Well, first of all, I don't know anymore what a £60 million player looks like. I mean, everybody seems to go for 60 or 70 million quid these days. I mean, he's tried, he's run around, he's had one good effort on the goalkeeper save just a minute or two ago, right inside the area. It was a shot, really, as he was falling. He's coming off now after an hour. Listen, he hasn't trained much, has he, for Sporting Lisbon this summer, because he wanted to move. One of these man doesn't turn up for work situations. Well, he's going to have to get up to speed pretty quickly for Arsenal. There's one more game on Saturday, and then a trip to Manchester United a week on Sunday.
Brilliant stuff. We'll head back to the Moose a little bit later on to check in on all the latest from the Emirates. Right, time now to get the latest odds update with Ladbrokes.
Odds update on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes. Supercharge your odds with our Odds Boost button. Selected markets applies to first £50 of stake. Terms apply. 18 plus. Gambleaware.org.
It's a hello to Cal Gilder from Ladbrokes. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad myself. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, we're doing good, mate. We're doing good. Now, we've just been hearing about Victor Gyökeres there at Arsenal. There's obviously been loads of movement. Rory and I have been quite excited about sort of the return of the number 9 to the Premier League, and how, you know, the big clubs, all clubs really seem to be going back to that focal point. The big news today is regarding Benjamin Sesko. We understand that he's choosing Manchester United over Newcastle United. What are the odds in terms of him becoming sort of top goal scorer next season? Because he wasn't necessarily prolific last season in a difficult season for RB Leipzig. What are the odds on that?
Yeah, Benjamin Sesko's the name on the transferati's lips, isn't it? Even if they haven't settled on the way that we're going to pronounce it. It's not yet live in our market, but our traders have done me a solid ahead of this slot to say that he'd be 16-1 to be the Premier League top goal scorer, regardless of whether he's in a Manchester United or Newcastle shirt. That makes him 5th on a list headed by Erling Haaland at 11-8. Interestingly, Alexander Isak is the 4-1 second favourite, despite there being no guarantee about where he'll be playing. Because of the situation with Isak, our market for Newcastle top scorer is suspended. He was 6-1 on to top that. United's one is live, and while we don't have the price for Sesko just yet, you'd imagine he'd settle between 5-4 leader Bruno Fernandes and 5-2 second favourite Matthias Cunha. At least that's what you'd want to be the case if you're a United fan, seeing the club spend 70 million quid not to sort out the glaring issue in goal.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And Cal, what's going on at Manchester United? Like, it feels like things are really moving in the right direction. They've signed 2 Premier League proven forwards. They're potentially going to bring in Benjamin Sesko, a young player that has the eyes of Europe looking at him. I'm seeing links to Carlos Ballet, but it feels like they are actually moving in the right direction. What odds have you got on Manchester United next season?
Yeah, I just mentioned that Sesko would be the 5th favourite to be the Premier League top scorer, and that's exactly where United find themselves in the title betting. They were joint 5th favourites alongside Newcastle at 33-1, but the Sesko news has actually seen them cut to 28-1. Less than 10 years ago, surprised I've not just crumbled into dust saying that. They're the precedent for going from the bottom third to champions, aren't they? But at 20-1, at least odds-wise, United are seen as likelier to be relegated than win the title. If the drop even looks halfway likely, you'd imagine Ruben Amorim would be on his way out of the job. He's 11-1 to be the next manager to leave. So if you're looking for a more realistic shout than champions or relegation, though, 6-5 for the top 6 finish, while they're 4-1 for top 4. That's another odds cut following the Sesko news, which goes to show how much our traders put stock in goals making up for deficiencies elsewhere, really.
Yeah, well, look, it's something that Manchester United have needed, and I can't help but think that look, I know that Šeško didn't have the best season last season, but I can't help but think with the players that are around him, Bruno Fernandes, obviously the first on that list, and then you've got, Ahmad, you've got Mbeumo, you've got Cunha. I certainly think it could be, an absolute belter of a signing for United. Let's turn our attention, though, to the Community Shield. Liverpool versus Palace. What are the odds on that? Because I feel like over the years, not necessarily consistently, but Palace have had Liverpool's number every now and again. And I just sort of think that, the wind beneath Palace's sails a little bit with after winning the FA Cup. Jean-Philippe Mateta just looks to be, I think for my money, one of the best strikers in the league. Is there an upset on the cards there? What's the likelihood of that?
Well, the odds don't suggest it. Liverpool are the favourites at 3-5. Palace are a touch under 5-1, and the draw 16-5. I am surprised Liverpool aren't shorter there, to be honest. We say about Palace, it's when they've got results against Liverpool when it's mattered, hasn't it? We all remember Istanbul, but we also remember Gerrard's final game at Anfield. Weren't it 3-1 to Palace, something like that?
Yeah.
Would you be shocked then if I told you that Palace have beaten Liverpool once in their past 17 meetings?
Wow.
Yeah.
I've just etched all of Palace's wins into my memory then. I don't know where I get that from.
That's it. It's the big results, isn't it? As soon as you get a big result like that, it feels like it's recent. And as we were just saying there with Leicester, that was 10 years ago when really in my head that was about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But, I've had twins in that time, so it feels like 6 billion eternities. But yeah, Liverpool done impressive business this summer, haven't they? And they might even break the British transfer record for a second time. But a player who could shine on Sunday is one from Chelsea's academy and then Liverpool's 16-year-old Rio Ngumoa. He's a shot 16-5 to score any time. Palace, arguably only one of their 3 signings this summer is for the first team, and he's a left back. But they've gone to Eberechi Eze and Jean-Philippe Mateta, who you just named there. So if you think they'll do to Liverpool what they did to City in the FA Cup final, you'll get 11-1 on Palace, or 40-1 if you go 1-0 Palace with Eze getting the goal. But my best bet, I think Cody Gakpo is going to continue his pre-season form by scoring any time in a Liverpool win, which pays around 4-1 with Ladbrokes.
Brilliant stuff, as always, Carl. Absolute pleasure. That was our latest look at the odds with Ladbrokes. 18+, gambleaware.org.
Odds update on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes. Supercharge your odds with our odds boost button. Selected markets applies to first £50 of stake. Terms apply. 18+, gambleaware.org.
We'll get into Benjamin Šeško and whether it was the right move and what Newcastle can do next in a moment. But there has been a goal at Arsenal. Ian Abrahams.
Arsenal 1, Villarreal 3. The goal midway through the second half scored by a very familiar name, Arnaud Danjuma, formerly of Bournemouth and Everton. Also a little bit of Spurs, but he didn't celebrate the goal anyway. He was sent through basically the Arsenal defence, extremely static, and one-on-one with Kepa in the Arsenal goal. He finished across the goalkeeper and into the back of that. Arsenal beaten in their last game in Singapore, 1-0 by Spurs. Getting thrashed here. Arsenal 1, Villarreal 3.
Rory, if you're an Arsenal fan, are you worried about that? Or how seriously do you take pre-season games?
It's tricky, isn't it? I don't think you can read too much into it, but I don't think it's completely insignificant. There was a time when I did. There was a time when I thought that it was totally insignificant, and I went on Chelsea's pre-season tour to the States about 10 years ago.
Right.
And we were champions. I thought it was all going to go really well. We got battered out there. We played in New York, Washington and Charlotte. We got battered. That was the season where Mourinho finished 10th, got sacked. It all went wrong. It was a really, really bad season. So the clues were there in pre-season, but I just chose to ignore them. And from there, I kind of learned. Pre-season, it's not the be-all and end-all, but you don't want to be getting battered 3-1 at home by Villarreal 9 days before the season starts.
It's not great for the old morale. No. I certainly think sort of in this incredibly tactical age that we live in, I would say it's more telling because these players are drilled into managers' systems and philosophies and things like that. And so I'm with you. I've begun to take a little bit more credence to it. My Forest haven't scored in pre-season and for I think 5 games or something, and that does start to wear on your shoulders. And then I think you go into the first game of the season a little bit nervous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I do. I do think it matters. I do think it matters to a degree, and certainly. I think I heard Gabby Agbonlahor on earlier saying something along these lines, that by the time you're 9 days before the start of the season, then it really does matter. Those are the games that actually do tell you how you're going to shape up, tell you what sort of form you're in, tell you what sort of mood the players are in. So, yeah, I don't think it's ideal for Arsenal to be losing 3-1 at home. But equally, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all either.
Yeah. Now, talking of your Chelsea there, we've got some breaking news. Sunderland have signed Chelsea forward Mark and you're going to have to help me with this.
I go for Gu.
Gu.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I go for Gu.
Well, they've signed him on loan. What do you make of that for Sunderland? They've been doing bits in the market. I think they've spent the 7th or 8th most in this window, showing a lot of ambition. I think Granit Xhaka, great signing. Do you think that they could be the club to sort of break the trend and stay up next season?
I mean, I really hope so. I think Sunderland are a brilliant club with a rich history, and I think that they add a lot to the Premier League. I also think that they're conducting fantastic business. The signing of Granit Xhaka was inspired. Yeah. Arguably, in fact, on some metric, the best signing of the summer if you take it all pound for pound. Like, he's given up on the Champions League football to go and be part of this Regis Lebris revolution.
Project, yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's really impressive. And Mark Yu going there, I think he needs game time. He will get it there. And he certainly knows where the back of the net is. Chelsea held him in high regard. So I think it's a very good signing. And like I say, I've got family in the North East. So I would like to see Sunderland do well this season. And if they can arrest this almost guarantee of newly promoted teams that are consistently relegated, it would be nice to have a bit of jeopardy around the relegation zone this year.
Absolutely. As long as it's not my Nottingham Forest, I welcome it. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT. Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, will join us next to tell us what Newcastle can do moving forward in this window.
It's not often you associate fan power with Chelsea Football Club, but one of the shining examples of it lies with a group called the Chelsea Pitch Owners. And they've proved to be the thorn in the side of owners past and present who've been dead set on moving stadiums to a larger, more lucrative piece of land. Essentially, the supporters group holds the freehold to the land on which Stamford Bridge sits. Former owner Ken Bates set it up at a time where some unruly property developers tried to evict the club from their ground. In order to prevent this, he established the CPO as a company that owned the pitch and offered the fans the chance to buy a share for £100. As well as that, they also own the rights to the name Chelsea Football Club, so if any owner wants to take them elsewhere, they can't be called Chelsea without the approval from the CPO. Now, in 2011, Roman Abramovich tried and failed to move them away from Stamford Bridge, and this has set a precedent for Todd Bowley and the current power brokers at Chelsea. They know any plan which involves moving from Stamford Bridge will require CPO approval from the now 13,000 fans who own it. There are fans who are concerned that if they stay at the Bridge, they'll be left behind their domestic and European rivals who are moving to more commercially successful stadiums. But for the heritage and history lovers, Stamford Bridge is one of the iconic English stadiums, and to move away would be a grave mistake. It might not be as flashy as others, but stadiums like it have something about them that cannot be replaced. One thing's for sure, if Bowley wants to take Chelsea away from their home, he'll have to go through the CPO first.
Yeah, good evening. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory, Jennings. And the big transfer news of the day seems to be the fact that Benjamin Sesko looks like he's decided Manchester United over Champions League Newcastle United. It is another blow in what has been an absolutely gut-wrenching summer for Newcastle. What should have been, a breakthrough summer for them to splurge that cash and to start really pushing at the top of the league, pushing for more silverware, playing in the Champions League. It seems to have all gone south, and there is nobody better to speak to this about than Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, the man that has brought us that bombshell Alexander Isak news, keeping us up to date on what has been happening in the North East. Absolute pleasure to have you on, Craig.
Yeah, guys, I've been keeping you up to date with what's not happening in the North East. More to the point.
You're not wrong. I mean, look, we'll start with... there's so many places to start. Exactly. What's not been happening? Whose fault is that? Why? What's the feeling at the minute? But, I mean, Benjamin Sesko, he looks to have chosen Manchester United. How's that been received amongst the top brass at the club, and where on earth do they go next? Because there must be such a lack of confidence in trying to bring in players that can help improve them next season.
Where do they go next is a good question, because for the past week or so, all roads have led to Benjamin Sesko. Now, I was out in Singapore and South Korea with the team on their Far East tour, and I think it was a story I broke a week ago that while Newcastle are being linked with Sesko, there was still that fear, that suspicion, that feeling internally that he did prefer a move to Manchester United. I think you always get a feel for a player as a club, and if they're desperate to join you, you know it's got a real chance of happening. If there's a lukewarm feel on the part of the agent, I think you've always got that fear that you could be being strung along to smoke out somebody else. Now, Manchester United, as soon as we were made aware of their interest, I think there was a feeling amongst us guys out in the Far East, he would end up there. Nonetheless, Manchester United's offer wasn't forthcoming. Newcastle was still being given encouragement from Sesko's camp, none more so than on Monday when they were told he was open to join them. So after that, it was all stations go, and they put everything into accelerating, agreeing that fee with RB Leipzig. What then happened on Tuesday morning? Manchester United formalised their offer, to no one's surprise, really. And given everything we'd heard previously, it is now looking likely that he will join Manchester United. But to go back and answer your question, where do Newcastle go from here? Well, Sesko wasn't being brought in to come along and play alongside Alexander Isak. He was going to be coming in, if they could have made it happen, to be Isak's replacement. So it does two things now. It delays Alexander Isak's potential move to Liverpool. It also leaves Newcastle without a centre forward going into the start of the season, because Alexander Isak today has been excluded from training. He said he doesn't want to play for Newcastle again. He wants to go to Liverpool. So right now, Newcastle have got no victory at all. They've got a player there who was a very good player, a wonderful player, who doesn't want to be there and wants to go, who they've opened their mind to sell him, which is why they pursued Sesko, Pedro, Ekitike, the others. But they've got none of them in. So they're in limbo at the moment. They've got to go back to the drawing board.
Craig, is there a world where Newcastle United could have no option but to keep Alexander Isak? Like, I feel like he's burned his bridge. I imagine that he'll be persona non grata with the fans. But if Newcastle cannot get anybody else in, the move is totally dependent on a replacement landing at Newcastle. Do you think Newcastle could do something fairly extreme in the way that we've seen maybe Daniel Levy do it in the past with Luka Modric, with Harry Kane? Is there a world where Alexander Isak is actually in a situation where he has no option but to wear the black and white of Newcastle again?
Absolutely there is. Yes, I mean, the Liverpool sale is dependent on two things. One, Liverpool putting down the money that Newcastle think is fair, which wasn't £110 million last Friday, by the way. And two, and this is more important than all of them, Newcastle are not going to sell if it leaves them without a centre-forward. Now, they are trying. They've accepted Isak wants to go, and evidenced by the fact they have pursued all of these top strikers. You know, there is a willingness to open their mind to that sale to Liverpool. I don't think it's a case of absolutely not for sale. That much is obvious now. They can't get that replacement in. Eddie Howe might have to do what he did last season and find a way, because, by the way, guys, Isak was unsettled 12 months ago. This isn't something new. Eddie Howe found a way to get him back in the building last season, and he had a wonderful year where he scored 27 goals, including a goal in the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool. He might have to do that again. I think all parties are hoping it doesn't come to that. But to answer your question, they could end up there. Yes, absolutely.
Craig, so many names have been thrown around in regards to what next for Newcastle, because they've been rejected time after time by certain players. You know, whether it's, we've heard the latest, you know, could it be Nicholas Jackson from Chelsea, who seems to be offered around like anything, you know, but there's potential maybe for Ollie Watkins if Villa are bringing in somebody and they're sort of squeezed PSR wise. Interesting, you know, Tim Vickery was on, our South American football correspondent, and he felt like it's absolute madness that Darwin Núñez would look to go to Al Hilal when Newcastle need a striker, and for him, he felt that that would be a great fit. Who is the most likely now target for Newcastle? Because they're sort of, I guess, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, they are, but they're not just after one player, they're after two. Don't forget Callum Wilson left on a free transfer in June. So they've got and they're looking at two tier of player. One, the replacement for Isak, and two, the replacement for Callum Wilson. Now, the player they are involved with at the moment in terms of talks is Johan Wisser at Brentford. But Brentford is seen more as the replacement for for Callum Wilson. They wanted him to come in and play, not second fiddle, that's the wrong word, but, you know, they're going to have 50, 60 games this year and play in rotation with an Ekitike, with a Sesko, with a João Pedro. So you've got Johan Wisser there. Beyond that, there's Ollie Watkins. But would the board allow Eddie Howe to bring in Ollie Watkins at 29 and Johan Wisser at 28? No, I don't think they would. It would be a case of one of those two plus a younger player, a project player they can bring on, like they did with Isak 3 years ago, doubling his value at least. So that is why, when you're looking for that profile of player, the Sesko type, there aren't many beyond that. Honestly, guys, if you've got some names, throw them back at me and I'll tell Newcastle, because right now, there's a small pool, and if you look at the way the game has evolved over time as well, teams aren't really producing, clubs and academies aren't producing centre forwards. If you want an inverted winger, go and knock yourself out. There's as many as you can as you can imagine. But those centre forwards, it's why the price is high. There is a finite supply of them, and Newcastle will find it difficult now to get that player. Now Šeško isn't going to happen.
Craig, you mentioned earlier that you were on the Far East tour with the club. You've obviously got great links with the club, and the way that you've broken this story has been fantastic. You've really led the line on this whole thing. When you were there, when you were in amongst the club and you were dealing with Eddie Howe, how did he seem? Because obviously the euphoria of what happened last year, winning a trophy for the first time in 70 years, the fact that you managed to finish in the top 5 and qualify for the Champions League, the euphoria around the club felt incredible. A great young coach, really ambitious ownership. It feels like it's gone stale, and you've missed out on so many players that it has to be like this can't just be bad luck. Did you feel that Eddie Howe was getting frustrated with what was going on?
Listen, he's someone I know well, and I've been around for the best part of 4 years now. Got all the time in the world from. I really think Newcastle are blessed, and they've got one of the greatest coaches of his generation. But he was down, he was frustrated out in the Far East. Now I will say that he's his mood changed between the two. I think arriving in Singapore and the fallout and everything there was on the back of the Alexander Isak story, him not travelling, him telling the club that he wants to go. Every question we fired at him wasn't about anybody who was there on the trip with him. It was about a fella who was back at home on Tyneside, who then went without the club, knowing to Spain, of course. But that's a different story. But then going into the second week, I think his mood improved. They had a good performance against Spurs. They had the progress on the arrival of Aaron Ramsdale. Anthony Elanga was looking sharp. The team played well against Tottenham on Sunday night in Seoul. So you come out of that, I think, with a little bit of renewed spirit. And when I spoke to him on Sunday night, he gave me those what I thought were really brilliant, wonderful quotes when he said, you know, we are Newcastle United. You've got to earn the right to train with us. You can't act poorly and just expect to walk back in. And that was Eddie on the front foot. And he's been good to his word this week. He stood strong with that stance. And I think it sends an important message, Isak, not training with the group today. But how will he be feeling now? It's been a difficult 48 hours again. It's been turbulent. I think he'll be feeling a little bit battered, a little bit bruised. But again, this was a conversation I had out there with him. It can change very quickly. You know, you stood there watching the team train as I was in Seoul 4 days ago. Sandro Tonali walks past, Joe Linton walks past, Bruno Guimaraes. You know, they've got wonderful players there. Sandro Tonali, Anthony Gordon, others. They've still got a brilliant squad team. Yeah. They've got a fantastic manager, fantastic coaching staff. They're in strong PSR position. They've just won a trophy. They're in the Champions League. They've had a difficult, frustrating summer and things at the club need to be better. The structure at the top, no sporting director, no CEO. It needs to change. But this can flip quickly. They just need some luck and some breakthroughs in the transfer market. But as you quite rightly pointed out there, Rory, shouldn't really be all doom and gloom. They ended doom and gloom. They ended last season on a real high. They've just got to rediscover that spirit, that feeling, that feel-good going into the season. Because right now, you can't get away from it. It's been really difficult.
Well said, Craig. And I certainly think that, you know, during this time, like you say, without a sporting director, I think Eddie Howe's really stood up sort of as a leader. And we know how great a coach he is, and we know how sort of good a bloke he is in the game. But to see him sort of, you know, being so strong within that situation and setting standards up for the rest of the team when all of this sort of maelstrom regarding Alexander Isak is happening, I think that shows a lot about the man and why a lot of people actually want him to be England manager. But now I've got to ask you, Craig, you talk about the great squad that they've got there. You've been reporting just in the last couple of hours that Newcastle want to add to that in regards to, you know, they're considering a move for John McGinn. What can you tell us about that and how likely is that, considering that, you know, I'm sure that Aston Villa will consider Newcastle to be direct rivals?
Yeah, well, last season, Newcastle operated with a stable of 6 midfielders. Eddie plays 4-3-3 formation. He's currently down to only 4 on that. Sean Longstaff has been sold to Leeds for £12 million, and Joe Willock picked up an injury in Singapore last week that's going to keep him out for up to 6 weeks. So 4 into 3 isn't really great maths, and Eddie wants another one, at least one. Now, one of the names on the shortlist, and I do believe it to be quite high on the shortlist, is John McGinn at Aston Villa. Now, when I broke this story a couple of hours ago with my colleague Simon Jones, there was a mixed reaction among the fan base. I get that. He's 30-year-old. He's a name that they're very aware of. It's not exotic. It's, you know, fans love nothing more than a signing, and they love nothing more than a signing of a player they know absolutely nothing about. You know, we know that by now. You guys will know that on this show. John McGinn, for me, if it could happen, would make a lot of sense. He doesn't miss a minute. He's at an age whereby he would, I think, be prepared to come in and play in a rotation with Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton. He's reliable. He's a good character as well. On the back of a difficult summer and everything that's gone on with Isak and his conduct, they've got good characters in there already, by the way. You know, Dan Burn, Trippier, all the rest of them. But John McGinn would add to that. So for me, it makes sense. Do Villa want to sell? I dare say they would say no, but he's got 2 years left on his deal. Would he fancy a new challenge back in the Champions League? I'm getting whispers that he just might. One to watch.
Fascinating stuff, Craig. Absolute pleasure to speak to you, mate. All the best.
Cheers, guys.
That is Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, who, of course, has been across all things Benjamin Sesko and Alexander Isak. Right, next up, we want your calls. Manchester United fans, are you happy with Benjamin Sesko? Do you have any reservations, or do you think that he is going to be the final piece of the jigsaw to get you back towards where you want to be? Newcastle fans, what on earth is going on? It's an absolute shambles, it seems. Let us know what you want your club to do in the remainder of this transfer window. 03717 223344. Pick up the phone. You will get through. We will see you next. Good evening. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings. We've just been speaking to Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, regarding that Benjamin Sesko news and where Newcastle go from this. But of course, another team, Rory, that would have benefited from Sesko choosing Newcastle United is Liverpool, because it seems that it's totally... that they need Newcastle to bring in a replacement so that they can ship Alexander Isak up for a British record fee.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And I think Newcastle are completely correct. I think Newcastle cannot consider, they can't even countenance selling Alexander Isak until a replacement is in the bag. It would just be totally unacceptable. They need to have a centre-forward at the club. So there are massive ramifications here. Like the domino effect of the transfer window is now starting to really fall into place. There is a chance that if Newcastle cannot bring in a centre-forward to lead the line for them, that they will have no option but to hold on to Alexander Isak. And there are examples of this. We have seen examples in the past where players have thought that they could leave. They've been desperate to leave. I mean, Luka Modric was destined for Chelsea. Roman Abramovich did everything within his power to make sure that Luka Modric became a Chelsea player.
Yeah.
Daniel Levy didn't allow it. You know, Luka Modric didn't play the first few games of the season. He was talking about going on strike. He ultimately realised that he wasn't going to get his move. So he went into that season, put in a brilliant performance for Tottenham, was one of the best midfielders in the world that year, and got the move to Real Madrid the following season. There is a world where Isak may have no option but to score loads of goals in front of the Gallagate next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to head to the phone lines in just a moment, but it is full time at the Emirates. Ian Abrahams.
Arsenal 2, Villarreal 3, and Villarreal were always comfortably in control of this game from the moment Nicola Pepe on his return to the Emirates fired them in front on 16 minutes. Not great goalkeeping by David Raya, or for the second in truth, of course scored by Carl Etta-Iong just after the half-hour mark. Christian Norgard headed Arsenal at least on the score sheet before half-time, but midway through the second half, Villarreal came forward again, and Arnaud Danjuma comfortably beat Pepper from the right-hand side of the penalty area. Max Down was fouled a quarter of an hour from the end to give Martin Odegaard the chance to again reduce the arrears and make it 3-2. But back-to-back defeats now for Arsenal in pre-season. Just one more game here against Athletic Madrid on Saturday, and after that, it's all about Manchester United and their hard start to the Premier League campaign. Not what Arsenal wanted. Arsenal 2, Villarreal 3.
Cheers, Moose. Great stuff. Yeah, not the pre-season that Arsenal would have wanted. And I've got Snigger in Rory Jennings here, Chelsea Rory. You're taking a bit of delight in that, yeah?
Yeah, I'm obviously, I will always find pleasure in Arsenal being beat. I will. It's part of who I am.
Exactly.
Particularly, everybody enjoys Arsenal losing, but when you're from Northwest London, you're always going to enjoy Arsenal getting beat. And I think the fact that they've lost at home, you know, my Instagram feed is littered with people who are at the game today, taking their kids, family members of mine who've all gone. So I am very pleased to see them lose, because that's 2 defeats now. Yeah. And it's a problem. And the longer it goes, the longer Gyökeres doesn't score, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. We're heading to the phone lines because Don, the Liverpool fan, has got in touch. Don, what do you want to say about this sort of Sesko stuff? And how do you feel as a Liverpool fan? Do you feel disappointed that he's chosen Manchester United, because it looked like he was the key to you boys getting Isak?
Well, he's one of the keys, but there'll be other options, and I think at the end of the day, Isak has made his mind up, and he'll end up being a Red. That's all that matters. But what I really wanted to talk about was Rory's initial conversation about why Sesko. There was only one choice, and that choice was Man United, and I find it fundamentally really, really difficult to understand why he hasn't mentioned 2 really important points. First of all, when you're a 22-year-old, you want to be developed. If I ask 100 people, who would you rather be developed by, Eddie Howe or Ruben Amorim? I'm telling you now, the majority of them would say Eddie Howe, right? That's number one. Number two, okay, if you're going to get playing time, and as a 22-year-old, what you want is playing time on that pitch. That's the most important thing to you. You go to Manchester United, they sign 2 of the other great forwards. You have a couple of bad games, and you're sitting on that bench, warming the seat. Go to Newcastle, okay, and the chances of you playing more time at Newcastle, if Isak goes, obviously, which he will do, is far outweighs the chances of you playing more time at Manchester United. And that's the important thing. And the third thing he mentioned about, I think he said something about the fans chanting your name at Old Trafford. I'm telling you now, again, ask 100 football fans, would you rather 70,000 Geordies chanting your name or 90,000 Stratford End chanting your name? I'll tell you what 99 of them would choose. Those 3 good points he forgot to mention.
That's not true. The final, I think the first 2, you make a very good point. I think Eddie Howe is a better manager than Ruben Amorim. I think that is a fair shout, and the game time is, again, a fair conversation. But there is absolutely no way that a footballer dreams of being serenaded by the Gallowgate more than they dream of being serenaded by the Stretford End. That is just factually incorrect. Manchester United as an institution are far more appealing to footballers.
Yeah, and footballers who come from Europe who have no affiliation with Manchester United, who don't really have the same feeling as you do, being a boy from England and understanding that's not part of their. They might pretend, but that's not the case.
Of course it's the case.
Some of them may have supported English teams when they were younger.
It doesn't matter. They've all grown up. They've all grown up loving Carlos Tevez and Eric Cantona and Cristiano Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney. We cannot possibly suggest.
Every person in Europe has grown up loving that team.
No. Are you genuinely trying to tell me here that Manchester United don't carry more weight historically than Newcastle for a young footballer of today?
But what you're as a 22-year-old, you're not going to choose a club based on their historic, grade and whether they're the biggest and the greatest club. You don't choose a club like that when you were a 22-year-old trying to make your career. I'm sorry, because if you did,
but they clearly do. Why has Brian and Burma chosen Manchester United over Newcastle? Why has Sesko chosen Manchester United? You're saying it doesn't happen, and there's case studies that prove it does happen right now.
I'll tell you why I think. I think there are two reasons. I think the first reason is they're getting more money, and that's an important one for a footballer. Although no one talks about it, and it's like the elephant in the room. If you're getting, 175 grand or 200 grand at Man United, and Newcastle are giving you 100 grand, that's a massive difference. And no one talks about it, but that is a huge pull for footballers. But they won't actually say that. Right.
Don, look, I think you raise good points. I mean, look, I agree with your point about Eddie Howe. I think that Eddie Howe is a better coach, and I think I take your point about being developed. And I would like to think that Newcastle could have more weight in a transfer window, because I want to see a Premier League where more clubs are able to break through that glass ceiling a little bit and compete. But ultimately, I take Rory's point that ultimately, if you're a kid in Europe, you've grown up thinking about playing for Manchester United, not necessarily Newcastle United. And unfortunately, that is just the way the pecking order is. Now, we'll want to head straight back to the phone lines and speak to Mick, who is a Newcastle fan. Mick, I mean, what do you make of all this, and how do you feel about this latest blow in the transfer window, mate?
I don't think it's a blow.
Okay, tell us why.
If that looks like he's staying, how is that a blow?
Well, because ultimately you've got a player, and look, I would love it if Isak did stay for you, because for the point I've just made, I'd like to see you challenge and kick on from the great season you had last season. But ultimately, it's probably not a good thing at the minute, because he doesn't want to play for your football club, and he's throwing his toys out the pram. He's not gone on pre-season. He's been pushing for a way out. Do you want him? Do you think that you can turn that round?
Absolutely. I think like the previous caller was saying about European pull, he will realise that he'll need to play. I think Rory just mentioned it as well with the Modric situation. He will come back into the team at one point or another after this, and what will happen is he'll come back into the team. He will start playing. He will start scoring goals. It'll all be forgotten about. We've not changed our situation. We were looking for a new striker to take place of Callum Wilson. So we're still at the same position as where we were before we, the start of all this. So there's nothing else going wrong here apart from we've improved on the right hand side, which we said we were going to do. We've improved on our goalkeeper. We're looking for a centre half. We're looking for another midfielder. I'd like to see Wharton come in, or even a Conor Gallagher, and we're looking for another centre forward.
Very optimistic, Mick. Thank you for your call. Optimistic, Mick. I mean, is it optimism, Rory? Is it delusion?
I love that. That was the perfect football fans approach, wasn't it?
Hey, fair play.
I think it's good news.
Yeah, it all sounds absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, the ceiling's crumbling in and everything's absolutely fine. I mean, we all do it. And look, there is a world, though, where he could be correct. It's so unlikely, but it could be correct. If Alexander Isak is forced to stay, I think he is a professional footballer. He is a professional man. He will, maybe even begrudgingly, he will score goals for Newcastle next season if he has no option but to score goals for Newcastle next season.
Hey, I can't see it, but for the sake of Mick and Newcastle fans, I kind of hope it happens. I think it'd be a great story. Right, in the next hour, we'll round up the latest transfers of the day, chat Rory's Chelsea, and a question we're asking, if Liverpool get Alexander Isak through the door and break Mick's heart, is it the best Liverpool squad in history? Give us your thought. Text us 81089 or WhatsApp us 0371722 3344.
Football fans all have stadiums we love, but do any of us have a pitch that we love? It might sound like an odd question, but pitches can be different sizes with big consequences. Why is that? And what are the actual rules? Back when association football started, pitches could be up to 100 metres wide and 200 metres long. That's longer than Ellen Road. Not the pitch, the stadium. Anyway, UEFA wanted a standard across Europe for international matches, which became 105 metres long and 68 metres wide. But some clubs have been rebels, not intentionally, but because of the stadiums. Take Highbury, for example. It was 5 metres shorter and a metre narrower, meaning away sides had a challenge to adjust. White Hart Lane was exactly the same. And actually, when Spurs temporarily moved to Wembley, they asked the FA to shorten the pitch. The FA, very offended by the sacrilegious suggestion, said no, which in fairness could have actually benefited Tottenham because when they moved into their shiny new stadium, the pitch was exactly the same size as Wembley's. Today, Forest Pitch at the City Ground is a big one. It's 2 metres wider than any other pitch in the Premier League. But the smallest of all, Craven Cottage, just 100 metres long and 65 wide. No excuse for not tracking your man. There are a couple of crazy outliers in Europe too. At Napoli's home ground, the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona, the pitch is a whopping 110 metres long. At least they don't play on a slope like Newcastle do. There's a 2 metre incline on the pitch at St James's Park. And don't get me started on the old pitch at Yeovil too. It used to be a slant of 2 metres corner to corner and across the halfway line. So UEFA have their standards, so do the FA, but they do give pitches in England some wiggle room. Pitches can be anywhere between 90 and 120 metres long and between 45 and 90 metres wide. I mean, the rules state you can't have a square pitch, but in theory you could have one that's 91 metres long and 90 wide. Imagine rocking up to play a Sunday League game and the pitch is basically a square. So there are rules and regulations on sizes, with a UEFA standard that roughly everyone follows, but as we all know, size doesn't matter, does it?
Good evening, how are we? We're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory, Jennings, and just after the bulletin, some breaking news. We're hearing that LAFC have officially, or they are going to announce the signing of Heung-min Son from Spurs for £20 million. Rory, what's your thoughts on that? You think that's a good move for Son, or do you reckon he still had some legs in him for the Premier League? No.
I think he's certainly done in the Premier League. I think you could even argue that it was over the year that he actually won the silverware. Like, I think he struggled. There were moments where he struggled. It was the perfect time to draw a line under the story. It's an amazing career. Where he ranks in the pantheon of Tottenham greats, I think, is a really interesting debate. I got quite a lot of stick on social media because I said that there was a chance that he wasn't in the top 10. Yeah. But I didn't mean it in a sneery way. I think that they've had a lot of icons. You know, Glenn Hoddle, Paul Gascoigne, Ozzy Ardiles, Gary Mabbott, Ledley King. You know, when you list them off, there's an awful lot of icons that have played for that club. But I think that it's the right time to go, and what a time to go off the back of winning that trophy to now go and live the high life in LA.
Absolutely, and he's given a lot to Spurs, hasn't he? And the fact that I think he won that, when he won that Europa League, you just sort of think he's the sort of player that deserves that. What he's given to the club, the type of person that he is, the type of player he is, obviously loved by his teammates, loved by fans. You know, I think we wish him well over in America, as you say, living the high life. Right, now it's time to look at the latest football action with Ladbrokes.
The big preview on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes. Supercharge your odds with our odds boost button. Selected markets applies to first £50 of stake. Terms apply. 18+. Gambleaware.org.
Delighted to say now joining us is our very own reporter, Ben Jacobs. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. I mean, there's absolutely loads to get through. This has been a brilliant summer. Well, I'm sure a busy summer for you. Let's start with Darwin Núñez, because I was really interested, Ben. We heard Tim Vickery on with H&J earlier on, and he was saying how he almost feels disappointed that Darwin Núñez looks like he's heading to Al Ahly. He would have liked to have seen him go to Newcastle, stay in the Premier League. What is the latest in terms of that potential move to Saudi?
Yeah, and I think Núñez actually has been the model professionally. He got 5 goals in pre-season, so you kind of think, could he have worth for Liverpool? But ultimately, they are going to move in the market, bring in another attacker. Whether that's Alexander Isak remains to be seen. Liverpool and Al Hilal now this evening have a verbal agreement for 53 million euros plus add-ons. There is a significant portion of those add-ons, and it is now done between the clubs pending formalisation. Núñez has agreed financials, and if he gives his green light, which is anticipated, then the formalisation of this deal will happen very quickly, and it will do so in Germany because that's where Al Hilal are based for their pre-season. So my expectation, because Liverpool players were off today, is Darwin Núñez will come in tomorrow, and then we'll get the first clue. Because if he doesn't train, it's just a day of goodbyes. He'll go before the Community Shield. If he trains, then maybe even though he's agreed the financials, he might need a little bit more time to decide, does he want to go to Saudi Arabia? Al Hilal believe this is a done deal. Liverpool are waiting to be informed in a formal sense. And I think we'll know the answer either late tonight or early tomorrow morning. But Al Hilal's expectation is they have signed Darwin Núñez, and it is now done in the club-to-club sense.
Massive, massive signing for the Saudi Pro League.
Yeah.
But Ben, you've got some news regarding the future of Amari Hutchinson.
Yes, I have, and one I think that you'll have a very keen eye on, which is that Amari Hutchinson is subject of an approach from Nottingham Forest. The Ipswich Town winger is looking to go and play Premier League football, but Ipswich have got a very high valuation. So Forest, I understand, have had a bid rejected in the region of £35 million. I think Ipswich are looking for double their money if they are to sell. So that would be a number a little bit closer to 50 million. I'm not so sure that Forest are going to go that high, but the player wants the move. Like I said before, he wants to be back in the Premier League. He wants to play European football. At the moment, that's Europa League for Nottingham Forest. So keep an eye on another bid. And you've also got a possibility, and they might well have a lot of funds very soon, that Brentford enter this race as well. They've got their Brian and Bumo money, a maximum package of 71 million. Maybe Johan Wissa departs. Newcastle are interested. Wissa is pushing for that move. So Brentford could bid. Nottingham Forest have bid, but Ipswich Town are not going to sell for under £40 million. And actually, I think if they are to sanction an exit, they'll be pushing for a number closer to 50.
I mean, look, I think it'd be a great signing for Forest. So, you know, with Alanga gone, we want that pace. He's the sort of player that can fit in, and I think it just it will be a great strength in depth, particularly playing in that European competitions. But Rory, 50 million quid for a winger that's got relegated seems to be a lot, doesn't it?
It's gone mad, hasn't it? Like when you compare that kind of pricing now, that's what players cost. Like it's ludicrous.
It seems to be the base price, doesn't it, Ben? Because we've seen a lot of this sort of 55 million mark being bandied around. What with Alanga going to Newcastle, we've seen sort of that almost be a bit of a benchmark fee for players of that ilk.
Yeah, and I think once one gets done, then everyone else is going to be asking for the same money. If you have to buy a player at 50 million plus, then when you want to sell a player, it's 50 million plus. And if you look at Noni Madueke, that was over 50. Anthony Alanga, over 50. And Bumo, that I mentioned, closer to 71. Some of these players naturally did important things statistically, but I'm sure Ipswich's argument is essentially, if you look at last season, yeah, they went down, but there were 2 players in particular that performed very strongly. One was Liam Delap, and the other was Amari Hutchinson. And I know they're not like for like, but there's sort of irony that as you look at the beginning of the window, there were deals to be had, either because players had release clauses. Delap, for example, that's why Chelsea were able to get him so cheap. But still, at that early part of the window, clubs that moved early because they had the PSR headroom were maybe shaving off 5 or 10 million. And now it's very much urgency. So if you want these kind of players, and clubs like Ipswich are prepared to shut the door and say, we'll trust Hutchinson to take us up, and then he'll want to stay because we'll be a Premier League club. So if Forest want a player like Hutchinson, you have to meet the market valuation. And market valuation isn't only what's the player worth, what's his age, how long's left on his contract. It's what have other players gone for. And we're in such a crazy window at the moment. And when you look at this sort of league table of spending and you see your Sunderlands and Leeds even pushing or exceeding 100 million. And everyone thinks they must have gone crazy with hundreds of signings. It's true, by the way, in Sunderland's case. But actually, two good players that are going to give you the kind of form you need in the Premier League to do well and push for Europe, they might be worth 100 million collectively, and we're seeing that. And this is why if Forest want a player like Amari Hutchinson, they're going to have to go a whole lot higher now.
And with that, you just mentioned £100 million player. As soon as you say that, you immediately think of Jack Grealish, don't you? Exclusive to talkSPORT, we've heard that there's news of Jack Grealish potentially going to Everton.
Yeah, Everton have made a approach to Manchester City that follows on from an initial inquiry right at the beginning of the window. They want Grealish and they'd like to do a loan. Two challenges. The first, are Man City going to sanction a loan? And they'll only do so, we understand, exclusively with 100% wage coverage. And then even with whatever 100% wage coverage is, can Everton persuade Jack Grealish, maybe with a view to an option to buy, or maybe due to the fact financially they can't do a loan on his current terms? So will Grealish go down in number with a view to playing and maybe trying to force his way into Thomas Tuchel's thinking? And I think there's actually some confidence on the Grealish side, from Everton's perspective, that he might make a concession, like Marcus Rashford did to go to Barcelona, but you still got to get all these other bits in place. It'll be a high wage regardless, even with a concession. There'll be a loan fee. So Man City are really bullish because they still think there might be someone out there that says, let's try and sign Jack Grealish permanently. So Everton are trying. Everton are confident they can get Grealish buy-in, but it's still a very complicated deal.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see. And I think that, you know, for what it's worth, I think that Jack Grealish would have to take a pay cut, particularly if he wants to go to Everton, because I can't see them paying, you know, around 300 grand a week. And for him, I think it's so important that he is in Thomas Tuchel's plans, and I'd love to see him playing in the Premier League. Just finally, Ben, what can you tell us around Nicholas Jackson? Because his name's been bandied around all summer. He seems to be a player that Chelsea are willing to, that is sort of surplus to requirements in a way, because there have been lots of different clubs that have been linked to him. The latest being Newcastle United, who seem to have failed to bring in the latest player, which is Benjamin Sesko. What's the latest on Nicholas Jackson?
Yeah, I think Nicholas Jackson and Newcastle could move. There were actually some initial talks even before the Sesko saga manifested as it did. There's an element, I think, here of plausible deniability from Chelsea's point of view, because if they are to sell Jackson for the right price, then it may suit all parties. But if he ends up staying at Chelsea, I think the last thing they want is to knock his confidence, especially after the 2 red cards against Newcastle and at the Club World Cup, to make the player feel that they were ever trying to force him out. So we have this slight paradox of Chelsea value Jackson, Chelsea are content if Jackson stays, and yet all signs point to the fact that they're actively exploring an exit, and right now he's more likely to go. And then I think you see João Pedro go at 9 with Liam Delap. If Xavi Simons comes in, he plays behind in the Nkunku role, and Chelsea's attack starts to take shape. So my read at the moment is there's a long time in this window left, and it remains more likely that Jackson departs. Then where? Newcastle could be one option post Sesko. We know that Aston Villa hold an interest too. Milan have made some inquiries, but they feel he's too expensive. And it will all come down to what the price is or what kind of structure Chelsea might entertain. We've heard suggestions from sources, and I've spoken directly to people that have backed this up, that Nicholas Jackson is £80 million. But I think the perspective of the suitors is that it might come down to more like Mbumo money, which would still be a good amount for Chelsea. It would still be affordable for a club like Newcastle, who have put that kind of money down on Benjamin Sesko. So price is going to be key to all of this, because I think at 80, and some have even said throughout the window 100, Nicholas Jackson wouldn't go anywhere within that bracket, because I don't think Newcastle or Villa would do that deal or even be able to. But if the price drops below 80 and closer to 65 or 70, I think Newcastle and even Aston Villa might bite.
Fascinating stuff, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us. That's our very own Ben Jacobs bringing us all the latest, thanks to Ladbrokes. 18+, gambleaware.org.
The big preview on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes. Supercharge your odds with our odds boost button. Selected markets applies to first £50 of stake. Terms apply. 18 plus. Gambleaware.org.
Right, next up, if Liverpool get Alexander Isak, is this the best squad to be assembled by that football club in their history? Mark Lawrenson certainly seems to think so. Good evening, you're listening to Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings. Now we're going to get back into the transfer news, but just wanted to let you know that Andy Galeforce Goldstein, talkSPORT's very own, actually won a game at the Pool World Championships. And if you want to see his next game, it gets underway at 8:30 and he takes on the well-known, I'm sure this is a household name, Evan Wagner or Wagner. Head over to the talkSPORT YouTube channel to watch that. Rory, it makes me think, you know, Andy Goldstein is a man of great confidence and great self-belief. And you strike me as that as well. If there was a sport that you reckon you would have half a chance in, sort of later in your life, what sport would it be that you reckon, yeah, I reckon I could go pro there?
Paddle. Wait, does poker count as a sport? Will you let me have poker?
No, poker's not a sport.
Poker's not a sport?
It's not a sport, it's a game.
Poker's... Okay, if you're not letting me have poker, because I would definitely say poker, I will say paddle.
Paddle?
I'm a demon.
Oh, yeah.
Demon.
Hey, I reckon we'd make a really good pairing. Not just on air, but on a paddle court.
Mate, we'd be like Niall Quinn and Kevin Phillips.
Exactly, yeah. Peter Crouch, Jermaine Defoe.
Yeah, mate, we would be that little and large combination that Harry Redknapp loves so much.
Because I'm almost sort of like nauseating saying it, but I've gotten into paddle recently. It's sort of the thing that Londoners do, and I'm not a Londoner, but I live in London, and so I feel like I've been pressured into doing it.
Do you think is this sort of earning your stripes? Do you get your London? You get your London credentials?
I get my respect amongst the Londoners in this office by playing paddle. But yeah, no, I reckon...
paddle would be, what would be your paddle or poker would definitely be if I had to turn pro at anything. Paddle or poker.
For me, other than us taking a paddle world by storm, I think it'd be something like rowing. Just because of the long levers, stick me in a gym for a year.
You're naturally built for that. That's for sure.
But that's pretty boring. So I think I prefer paddle.
Yeah, paddle, mate. We'd be a great duo. Also, not many people play it, so you're not going up against. You're not going up against many people, and you're generally going up against fairly middle class Londoners, and we can batter them.
Absolutely, it's emerging sport. Yeah, I think we got the jump on these boys. Right, we're going to head back to the topic of discussion because, of course, it looks like, regardless of the fact Benjamin Sesko has chosen Manchester United, which is a blow for Newcastle and also a blow for Liverpool, who were hoping that the Sesko deal would go through so they could get Alexander Isak. But we're asking the question, if Alexander Isak does indeed sign for Liverpool, and we believe that that's likely to happen, is this the best squad they've ever had? Well, I was quite surprised by this because this morning, Liverpool legend Mark Lawrenson joined the breakfast show and made a very interesting call about his old club.
And if Isak comes as well, he's going to be amazing. And probably it would be, if he signs, and whether it's a big if or not, we don't know, it's probably the best. It will be the best squad that the football club have ever had for me.
Wow, that's a statement in itself, Loro. That, to be fair. Where's the biggest threat coming from, Loro, this season?
Maybe a little bit Liverpool themselves, if they think they can coast it, which I don't think they will, obviously. But well, they've all strengthened, haven't they? You know, obviously Arsenal has strengthened. Chelsea will be very, very interesting. What will Man City be like? I think this next season will probably be one of the best seasons in terms of it will go very, very well, sort of down to the wire for somebody who wins it. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Liverpool legend Mark Lawrenson there saying that this would be the best squad for Liverpool that they've ever assembled. Now, coming from someone that's won five league titles, a European Cup with Liverpool, that's a bold statement, Rory.
Do you know what? You're absolutely right. It's a really bold statement. But before we analyse exactly what he said there, it's just so nice, isn't it, to see Mark Lawrenson? Mark Lawrenson is symbolic of my youth, watching him on Match of the Day on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Like, such an icon. Yeah, absolutely. Great to hear him. And then you analyse what he said, and he says that it's the greatest Liverpool squad that's ever been assembled. And you think about the kind of teams that he was part of. Yeah. You think about the land-breaking teams that he was part of. Like, he really was part of some of those iconic moments. And the reason why Liverpool are the club that they are today, the reason why they're held in such high regard, is because of loyal servants like Mark Lawrenson. Do you agree? Do you agree with it? I'm not sure I do.
What I'd say about this is it's easy to say that before they've even played a game together.
Yeah.
And so I think Isak needs to sign, first of all, and then he needs to go and win a Champions League and win a league, you know, maybe in the same season for them to be considered the best ever Liverpool squad. You can say that on paper. Look at Real Madrid last season. They didn't win the league. They didn't win the Champions League. They had, you know, another Galactico side, Mbappe coming in, and they didn't quite get it to work. And now, for me, Liverpool are clear favourites. I'm not trying to make one of these absolutely sort of like mad shouts and say, oh, Liverpool are going to be nowhere near it. I'm not going to say that. But I do think that Arne Slot has a brand new challenge on his hand, which I'm sure he will absolutely be relishing. But he's got to bring together, if he gets Isak in, he's got to bring together this sort of new attacking lineup with Florian Wirtz, Mo Salah and Alexander Isak. Mo Salah's used to being the main man, but so's Alexander Isak, and arguably he's the best striker in Europe and by extension the best striker in the world. And so I think that's a difficult task for Arne Slot.
No doubt. And the reason why I think that there could be some doubt as to whether it's the greatest, I think it's the best team in the league by considerable distance.
Yeah.
I think they win the league by considerable distance. But the reason why I think we could actually have a conversation about it being the best squad is because the depth in this squad isn't necessarily what it needs to be. You look at the midfield, you look at the players that have left, even up front. I was about to say that they've got loads of depth up front, but Harvey Elliott's going to leave.
Yeah,
Darwin Núñez is going to leave imminently, it seems, certainly from what we've just heard there from talkSPORT's Ben Jacobs. They need to replace those players. They need to make signings.
You didn't mention him. Luis Diaz. I think that could be a massive loss because if you're replacing Luis Diaz with Alexander Isak, it's not like for like. And so I'm interested to see, and again, look, I'm not saying Liverpool are going to struggle next season. I think that the likelihood is they'll win that league at a canter, but it is a new problem for them.
It hasn't got the depth throughout yet. I'm sure, look, if they go out now and they sign Mark Gahey and they bring in covering midfield or whatever, then fine. But what I heard recently, and it shocked me a touch, was Arne Slot saying that he believes Ryan Gravenberch is capable of playing centre-half. He believes Endo is capable of playing centre-half. And look, we can talk about the squad being brilliant, no doubt. We can talk about the squad being the best in the league at the moment, no doubt. But I'm just not sure I agree with Mark Lawrenson that it is the best of all time. Simply because, yes, there are some icons, some glamorous footballers. They're already champions. Some actual icons of Liverpool in Van Dijk, Salah. But they're also talking about playing a midfielder who they've deemed not good enough to play centre half at the moment. So until they get the depth throughout the squad, I wouldn't say it's the best squad of all time.
And I tell you, for me, what would make it, I guess, crown it, if once they get Isak, is Mark Gahey.
Yeah.
And you know, I wouldn't be surprised equally if Mark Gahey did stay at Palace and they offered him an extension and said, stay with us for a year. But that would be absolutely game over. And then I think maybe with that strength in depth at centre-back, maybe we're talking about a side that could go on and win a treble. Who knows?
They need him. I feel like it's got to the stage with Liverpool regarding their centre-half situation. You know, Kwanzaa's gone. They've got major injuries. As things stand, they've got one fit centre-half. And, they play in the Charity Shield imminent.
Yeah.
So they do need to make some moves. But if they go and sign Mark Gahey, and Mark Gahey is undoubtedly the best English centre-half in the game at the moment, yeah, I believe then you're talking about the squad of all squads.
Now, just talking about Mark Lawrenson's claim that this could be the best Liverpool squad in the club's history if they get Isak. We just got a text here, no name, but they say, even with Isak, is this the best Liverpool squad ever? Absolutely not. Just take the spine. Is Alisson better than Clements? Arguably, but I'd say no. Is Van Dijk better than Hansen? No. Is Gravenberch better than Souness? No. Is Salah better than Dalglish? Again, arguable, but I'd go no. And finally, is Alexander Isak better than the great Ian Rush? No.
That's great. What was the spine? So Clements, Hansen, Souness, Dalglish.
And then Rush.
And Rush, okay. Yeah, so no, it isn't.
So it's difficult to argue, isn't it? Right, up next, we're going to be talking about Rory's beloved Chelsea. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT. Yeah, good evening. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders here on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings, now with the news that there will be Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn again. Don't forget, the next Saturday, DAZN brings you 5 huge fights in one night. Unbeaten rising star Moses Atoma takes on the proven and dangerous Dillian Whyte in a heavyweight showdown. Plus action from Nick Ball, David Adeleye, Raymond Ford and Filip Hrgovic. Don't miss it next Saturday, August the 16th. Watch only on DAZN.
Boxing Update on talkSPORT with DAZN, the global home of boxing. Buy now at dazn.com/boxing.
Right, Rory, we're going to get straight into your Chelsea because, of course, by extension of the saga at Newcastle, it looks like that Nicholas Jackson of your Chelsea could be next on Newcastle's long list of strikers to potentially replace Alexander Isak. We were just speaking to Ben Jacobs there about that deal, and he was saying that the fee that Chelsea would be looking for would be £70 million. Now, we're talking about a striker that clearly has raw talent, clearly can be an absolute handful, but I think scored 10 Premier League goals last season, 14 the season before. I think, of course, 4 of those were in that game against Spurs, which was absolute madness. 70 million for Nicholas Jackson. You must be absolutely laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I desperately hope this happens. I really do. And I cannot understand for the life of me how Newcastle can go anywhere near this valuation. Like, I've watched Nicholas Jackson. I've watched him far too often. Yeah. And he is possibly one of the most profligate strikers I've ever seen play at Chelsea. Like, genuinely, I mean that. And I feel so relieved now. It's like the shackles are off. I can actually say this because, you know, when he's your player and you want to defend him and you desperately want it to come good, you feel like you almost have to. You owe it to him to defend him.
But you've given up on it.
No, I've given up. I've given up on him so. He is not the striker. Listen, is there a world where he can be a decent Premier League player? Absolutely.
Do you not think he's already a decent Premier League player?
I think he's all right. Yeah, I think he's okay. I think he's fine.
Do you think he's got it in him to be a great Premier League?
No, he doesn't. Do you know why? Because it isn't only about missing chances. Excellent strikers miss chances. Ian Wright missed chances. You know, you've seen plenty of examples of top-tier, elite-level centre-forwards that do miss chances. But this is different with Jackson. It's sitter after sitter. And the other thing that he has done, and this is really significant, is he's cost us. He's cost us at major moments. Think back to two events that happened in the last couple of months. Chelsea had a massive game away at St James's Park. Actually, this game was played at St James's Park. They should be aware of how dangerous it is to have in your team. We've gone up to St James's Park. We're on the run-in to the Premier League. It's the make or break period of the season, and we could not get beat up there. To have any chance of qualifying for the Champions League, we could not get beat. That's how it felt at the time. We got to St James's Park. Nicholas Jackson gets himself sent off. Bang. Your dad's 10 men. Of course you get beat. Yeah. Because Jackson got himself sent off. We then go to the States to play in this Club World Cup, a tournament that we were desperate to win. In the group, the way that the group shaped up, it felt like we had to finish top of the group to have any chance of winning it. We're playing in Philadelphia in the second game of the group, and he gets himself sent off again. And it costs us again. Like, he is a liability. And he doesn't score enough goals to make it worth having. He isn't worth... You know, some players who can be a little bit temperamental, it's worth it because they're amazing. Luis Suarez is a good example. Unpredictable, volatile, but brilliant. Nicholas Jackson is none of the above.
You've been, and you are, a huge admirer of Eddie Howe, and you think he, you know, from what I understand, think he's one of the best coaches in the Premier League.
Totally.
Do you think that he could bring something out of Nicholas Jackson that could be of a real benefit to Newcastle, who, let's be honest, they're not going to replace Alexander Isak like for like. They're not going to get a player anywhere near his talent. Do you think there's hope for Nicholas Jackson under Eddie Howe potentially to becoming a really good striker that scores you 20 goals a season?
It depends what his role in the team is. Is he signing for Newcastle United to be the Alexander Isak replacement, or is he signing for Newcastle United to be the Callum Wilson replacement? If he's a Callum Wilson replacement, somebody to help Newcastle out as and when, somebody to play a key role in the team but not necessarily be the main man, somebody who can potentially miss chances because there's someone else there to convert them. There are attributes to Nicholas Jackson's game that are worthy of being on the pitch. He brings others into play very well. He can play with his back to goal. He works very hard. There are many reasons to have him in the team. But what Nicholas Jackson will never be is a top-tier, elite-level goal scorer. That isn't who he is. And if Newcastle are buying him to replace Alexander Isak, I think that's a real problem. But if Chelsea can double our money on him, off the back of 2 years of fairly paltry service. I mean, that's a huge indicator that the sporting directors actually do know what they're doing, because they bought this player in from Villarreal with no real reputation. They paid 32 million quid for him. They're going to double our money on him after 2 years. 2 years of not bad service.
Yeah.
So it's vindication for what they're trying to do.
And I think as well, fair play to the top brass at Chelsea. You know, there's lots of criticism about the amount of players that they've brought in and the amount of sort of attacking wingers they've got, etc., etc. But what they are good at doing is getting rid of players for a big fee. And if what we understand, you know, the price that Chelsea want for Nicholas Jackson, 70 million quid, is anything close to that, you think, job well done for your lot. But I just want to ask about, you know, you've had some good incomings, Liam Delap, João Pedro, who for me looked like a proper Chelsea striker in the Club World Cup, and just how refreshing for a striker to come into a big club with lots of expectations in a moment where they need him to score goals. None of this Victor Gyökeres, you know, 60 minutes, 12 minutes, you know, oh, well, he's not had much time to bed in. He didn't need any of those excuses, João Pedro, because he just came and did it. Yeah. That must give you confidence going into next season.
Yeah, I mean, he was so ready. You know, sometimes you sign a player and they're just clearly ready. They're ready for that step up. They're ready for that challenge. And João Pedro has certainly been that. You know, he was excellent at Watford. He scored massive goals for Brighton, big Premier League goals, but also big goals in Europe. Like, I remember watching Brighton played Marseille, and I was watching that game. Obviously, I was desperate for Marseille to win the game. Marseille, rich club, rich heritage, rich history, like previous winners of the European Cup. And they were playing Brighton. Obviously, I want Marseille to win that game. And João Pedro steps up in the final minute and bangs in a winner against Marseille. And you kind of go, wow, it's a big moment. Brighton beating Marseille.
Why are you desperate for Marseille to beat Brighton? Are you not one of those that wants English teams to do well in Europe?
Far from it.
I mean, I would understand why you might not, as a Chelsea fan who for the past 20 years has been in competition with the likes of Man United, Liverpool City. I could understand why you wouldn't want them to do well in Europe. But Brighton... No, you've never really been in direct competition with them. Why wouldn't you want them to beat Marseille in a tournament that you weren't even in?
I mean, I generally don't ever want an English side to win in Europe apart from Chelsea. That's my general outlook. If Manchester United, Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, whoever are playing in Europe, I will always favour whoever they're playing, regardless of who it is. With regard to Brighton, the reason I didn't want them to win is because Brighton competing in Europe, I think it's a great example. Brighton playing Ajax and beating Ajax. Brighton playing Marseille and beating Marseille. It's an example to demonstrate quite how wrong the Premier League has gone in terms of the amount of money sloshing around in it. Like, those two clubs should never be meeting.
You would have it your way that Chelsea and the Big Six, they keep most of the money so that they can maintain their dominance at the top of the game.
No, it's not so much about the money that Chelsea would have. It's more about the money that the Premier League have. Like, you know, when you read...
You want the Premier League to have less money?
Yeah, I think that the amount of money that is in the Premier League is damaging to football. Yeah, I do. You know, I'll give you a good example of this. You know, when Ruud van Nistelrooy was manager in Holland and he had a front two that were potentially capable of winning the league. And in the summer, the front two were Cody Gakpo and Noni Madueke. And then in that January transfer window, he lost both his centre forwards and didn't win the league. Like, that's at PSV. That's a great club, a great history. PSV Eindhoven, they could have won the league that year, but then suddenly the amount of money sloshing around the Premier League clubs fly over to Holland and just take the two best.
I don't get why he got it in for Brighton.
Yeah, I mean,
I've always got it in for Brighton.
I've got it. I mean, Brighton shouldn't really be playing Ajax in anything other than a pre-season friendly, should they? Like,
I disagree.
The two clubs are so
they've
far
been so
apart.
well run.
I mean, Ajax, one of the greatest clubs, one of the most rich clubs in terms of the history and heritage and what they represent. Their gift of football goes on and on and on. It's the legacy of Johan Cruyff. It's that team in 1995 that won the European Cup with effectively their youth team. It's that. Versus, I don't know what to say about Brighton.
Well, look, I mean, it's clear Ajax are a bigger club than Brighton, but surely it's a good thing for the game that clubs like Brighton, clubs like Forest, like Villa, like Newcastle,
Forest and Villa aren't comparable to Brighton. This is very much a sort of a Brighton Brentford issue rather than a Forest Villa issue. I like Forest and Villa.
You're a man of footballing traditions, so you put it that way.
Footballing traditions and big clubs with rich histories and rich supporters who contribute. It's what I want to see. Is Sheffield Wednesday fans going on a European tour, Villa fans, Forest fans. That's what I like. Brighton, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous. And fair play, Tony Bloom is a genius. What he's built there is very impressive. But, you know, the 20,000 Brighton fans that go to the Amex on the weekend, my only question to them
I'm sure it's more than 20,000. I don't have an encyclopedia.
I'd say it's less than 20,000 that support Brighton. I wonder who they used to support would be my question.
Let's head back to Chelsea now. Do you think you can win the title?
there is a world. It's going to quite a complex answer. You ready for it?
Yeah.
It's quite a complex answer because it's reliant upon it all going wrong for many other teams. So what I think is going to happen this season is Liverpool going to win it by a country mile.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a really, really early victory. I think they'll come out the blocks firing, and they could have it won. Maybe not formalised, but they could have it won by March, really early. They could have it in the bag, and it will be announced in April. What could happen? This is what Chelsea need. You know, the unpredictable. You know what happened to Man City last year, losing 9 out of 11 games? Yeah. You know, if the total to win the Premier League next season becomes in excess of 95 points, which I think it will, Chelsea can't win the league. Chelsea can't accrue in excess of 95 points. I think there's only one team that can. That will be Liverpool, and that's what I think will happen. But let's say that the title is won by something sub 86, 86 or less, 86, 85, 84. I think Chelsea could win it. So if it goes a little bit wrong for Arsenal and a little bit wrong for Liverpool and a little bit wrong for Man City, I think there is a chance that Chelsea could be the team waiting to snatch the title in a way that nobody necessarily predicted.
Well, whilst I don't think that is going to happen, that's what I want to see. Last season we knew who was going down. We knew Liverpool were going to win it.
Jeopardy.
And of course, I just think for the sake of the Premier League, I want to see a little bit more jeopardy. I want to see Liverpool struggle in the first 10 games of the season to fit in all of these stars.
But you know what's going to happen, don't you? I'll give you quite a bold prediction that's actually not that bold. You know the glamour and the glitz, and it's totally correct that we put upon the Manchester City Centurions. They achieved the impossible that season. The Centurions, it's a ridiculous tally. Liverpool emulate that this year.
100 points.
100 points.
You've heard it here first, 100 points for Liverpool. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes, 18+, begambleaware.org. Our thoughts on Jack Grealish and Ipswich rejecting a bid from Nottingham Forest. Good evening. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside the newly crowned, football snob, Rory Jennings.
Yeah, apparently so. I mean, I would disagree with that. I would say I'm totally egalitarian, man. But
apart from the fact that you don't want a club like Brighton to be anywhere near Europe, and you think there's too much money sloshing around in the Premier League, which I think surely is incredibly rich for you to say as a Chelsea fan.
Mate, there is too much money sloshing around the Premier League.
Because you've got it, mate.
There is. I don't like
your
this.
club. Your club does.
No, but I don't like the amount of money that's going on that's sloshing around the Premier League. I don't like the fact.
So you'd like Chelsea to have less money and for clubs like Brighton to have more.
I think that there is something is massively wrong. That in every competition, in every European competition, the English side is the favourite to win it. The English side is expected to win it because we have so much money that the glorious Dutch teams and the glorious Portuguese teams and the glorious Spanish teams find it very difficult to compete with them.
But as a Chelsea fan, for you to complain about the amount of money in the Premier League is slightly ironic, isn't it?
No.
Because of how much you spent over £1 billion under Todd Bowley. You've only just got yourself a striker. I mean, I just think it's rich coming from a Chelsea fan.
I think it makes it even
to say that how dare clubs like Brighton do really well and compete in the Europa League.
It makes it even more valid. Like, but realistically, it's not only you know there is this positioning that I'm a snob, and I find it very offensive because it's not true. I'm not saying that it should only be the English sides. I want Ajax to be strong. I want PSV Eindhoven to be strong. I want Marseille to be strong. I don't want Brighton to be strong.
So Rory doesn't want unlikely sporting achievements like Brighton playing in Europe. And talking about unlikely sporting achievements, we are watching on our screens Andy Goldstein miss another putt, bless him. But he is 1-0 up in a race to 8 in the Whirlpool Championships against the well-known Evan Wagner, or Vagona. There's a slight issue with the pronunciation there. But if you do want to watch that, head over to our YouTube channel. You can see how Andy Goldstein gets on. We'll be keeping an eye on that here. Bless him, Andy Goldstein, rating himself as a pool legend. Right, we're going to turn our attention back to the latest transfer news because, of course, this is Transfer Insiders. And talkSPORT exclusively brought you this line just a few minutes ago with our reporter, Ben Jacobs. And it is that Manchester City want Jack Grealish's wages covered in full by any club taking him on loan. Now, of course, I'm sure you'll be aware Everton have made approach to Manchester City to sign Grealish on loan. Talks are at an early stage. The England winger, or it's probably more appropriate, the former England winner who clearly needs full-time football to get back into Thomas Tuchel's plans. He earns around 300 grand a week, Rory. Surely, if he wants to be on that plane to America for the World Cup, and he wants to play at Everton, he's got to take a wage cut.
Yes, I think he probably does. I find this whole Jack Grealish story, though, I find the saga and the narrative around it, I just don't understand it. You know the narrative that Jack Grealish has been ruined or he isn't necessarily the player that he could be. Jack Grealish is a tremendous footballer today. Any club would be so lucky to have him. And I don't think there's any real jeopardy about him going to the World Cup with England. Like the fact that
you don't think there's any jeopardy?
I don't think there should be any jeopardy, no.
Well, he's hardly been playing, mate.
No, I mean, and Gareth Southgate obviously didn't take him, but I think that tells us more about Gareth Southgate than it does Jack Grealish. I think if you look at the way that England played in Germany last year, and you could see that we were screaming out for somebody to play on that left-hand side. You had Foden, who just brought the ball inside. You had Kieran Trippier, who couldn't kick with his left foot, who just brought the ball inside. It would have been a very different tournament for England if Gareth Southgate was brave enough to take Jack Grealish instead of being so cowardly.
But don't you think it would have been
Kieran Trippier at right back?
But it would have been difficult for Gareth Southgate to take Jack Grealish because his game had been completely hampered and sort of ultimately, I think, ruined by the system at Manchester City. Now, this isn't a direct criticism of Pep Guardiola because what he's achieved at Manchester City is absolutely incredible and world class. But I think it's come at a cost of Jack Grealish's playing style. He's become a sort of system-focused. When I think about Jack Grealish now, the image that comes to my mind is of a player gathering the ball on the left, sometimes on the right, trying to go forward, turning back, passing it back, or getting fouled.
I agree.
And that isn't the Jack Grealish that would have flourished in an England jersey. We needed a Jack Grealish to be playing in that number 10, causing havoc, being mercurial, and he wasn't doing that at Manchester City.
But what I find very difficult is when you look at the trophy haul, when you look at the output, when you think about how integral he was to Pep Guardiola in Man City's best ever season.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. This isn't an exaggeration. You could make the case that Jack Grealish in the treble-winning year
was the best
first name on the team sheet.
Yeah, totally.
I don't understand now how people try and position the £100 million as a waste of money, or the transfer. No, not necessarily you, Max. But do you at least concede that a lot of people position the transfer as being a flop?
Yeah, I think some people do. And as you've just said, that's absolutely ridiculous because he was the best player in that treble-winning season. And I'm sure that Jack Grealish will largely look back at his time at Manchester City as a highlight in his career.
And I love him.
I think that football fans will remember Jack Grealish, not just as someone that won a treble, not just as someone who at a time was brilliant in an England shirt, but as a player maybe that didn't fulfil his potential in terms of what he could have been as a player.
Yeah, I think you are correct on that. I think he's probably or possibly sacrificed some of his, like what Jack Grealish could have been was one of those sort of 1970s maverick throwback footballers that was just like somebody who played in almost given a free role at a different team. That's never going to happen at Man City. So he did sacrifice a little bit of himself. But is that not admirable? That he gave up a little bit of what he was in order to fulfill his potential for the team, in order to make sure that Man City won a treble in the most glamorous and glorious of ways. Yeah, he did sacrifice himself a touch, but he still performed to a ridiculously high level that season. He still kept Phil Foden out of the team that season. And overall, I think Jack Grealish is not only a credit to Man City, but I think he's a credit to football in his country. I love him. I really do. Should he go to Everton, though, is a different question. And do you know what I wanted him to do? I wanted him to go to Naples and retain the league there. I wanted him to go and be part of like Antonio Conte's like glamorous Napoli team, because I thought he'd thrive in Italy. I thought that the Napoli faithful would adore him, and I thought that if he was doing the business there, Tuchel would have no choice but to pick him. Playing for David Moyes at Everton, I don't know. Do you think it's a good move for him?
It's difficult to say. I think Everton are going to have a massive bounce when they get into that new stadium. I think that the signing of Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, as has been revealed today, I think that's a great signing for them because I think he's a good young player.
You reckon?
I do, yeah. I do. I've seen him at Leicester. He's a Nottingham boy. I think that he can give a lot to that Everton side. And I think that having Jack Grealish in front of him, that's really exciting. That's exciting for English football.
I think it's exciting for Dewsbury-Hall. I don't know how exciting it's for Jack Grealish to link up with Dewsbury-Hall. I think it all feels a bit flat to me. And you know when you said about the new stadium, like there's nothing quite like the Gladys Street. There's nothing quite like Goodison Park. And we've seen examples. Arsenal are a very good example of this. West Ham are a very good example of this. Teams go into new stadiums and it doesn't necessarily go the way you think. Okay, you get the euphoria, you get the excitement, you get the full houses, but it won't feel like home. In fact, I vaguely, it was Gabby Agbonlahor, wasn't it, who scored a couple against Arsenal when they were new into that stadium, I think. And it doesn't necessarily go as easily as well as people think it will. So I feel like Jack Grealish, and this is no slight at Everton, but I just feel like Jack Grealish is better than Everton. I really do. I feel like he is a top-tier player. I feel like he could compete in the Champions League. And I think it would be a shame if he doesn't do that, because this is the move, isn't it? Like, he's going to leave Man City. He's getting on a bit now. This is the move for him. And Everton are a great club with a rich history, but they're not in the Champions League.
No.
So I would...
Are you surprised that another club in the Premier League, a slightly bigger club than Everton, haven't come in for him? Like, are you surprised that maybe someone like Manchester United haven't come in for him? And I mean, maybe not, because they've got Bruno Fernandes already in that position. They've signed Cunha, they've signed Mbeumo. But I do know what you mean.
Yeah,
it feels like Jack Grealish still belongs in the top six.
Newcastle, Tottenham, teams that are in the Champions League. Also, when you think about the history of Tottenham and the players that they love Gaza, love Ardiles, love Ricky Villa, love Gareth Bale, born to play for Spurs and all that they used to see.
Particularly after they missed out on Morgan Gibbs-White.
Grealish is a bit
surely
of that,
Jack Grealish, yeah, I mean, he's cut from the same cloth.
Grealish is such a bit of that. Like, well, and as the shelf side would love him.
I should say, Morgan Gibbs-White is cut from the Jack Grealish cloth, you know, and I feel like he deserves to be in a top six club. And this isn't Everton fans will take it as a criticism. Sorry if you do, but ultimately, I think that Jack Grealish, I agree. I think that he should be playing for a bigger club at the minute.
It's very rare that two people, in the way that you and I have here, have agreed about Jack Grealish. Generally speaking, when I speak to anyone about Jack Grealish, I end up arguing with them because they start telling me that he's a waste of money and he's this and he's that. And I don't know why, but it really winds me up because I love Jack Grealish. I don't even know why I do.
And he's the sort of player that this country should be producing.
I agree.
And he's a player that the national team should find a place for.
Yeah.
That I think ultimately.
I go into bat for Jack Grealish so passionately.
Yeah.
You know, I really love him and I really want it to work out.
And by the way, what a top bloke.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he's just totally honest with himself. I like the fact that you've seen him sometimes out having a few beers after and celebrating.
Yeah.
That's what you should do if you're a player that good and you've won the things that you have. So yeah, big fans of Jack Grealish here. Right, Andy Goldstein, by the way, who is, probably thinks he's as good looking as Jack Grealish, but definitely isn't. Is 2-0 up in his pool game in the Florida Open. If you want to watch that, head over to the talkSPORT YouTube channel. The championship, though, gets underway this Friday live on talkSPORT. We're going to give our predictions next.
Football fans all have stadiums we love, but do any of us have a pitch that we love? It might sound like an odd question, but pitches can be different sizes with big consequences. Why is that? And what are the actual rules? Back when association football started, pitches could be up to 100 metres wide and 200 metres long. That's longer than Ellen Road, not the pitch, the stadium. Anyway, UEFA wanted a standard across Europe for international matches, which became 105 metres long and 68 metres wide. But some clubs have been rebels, not intentionally, but because of the stadiums. Take Highbury, for example. It was 5 metres shorter and a metre narrower, meaning away sides had a challenge to adjust. White Hart Lane was exactly the same. And actually, when Spurs temporarily moved to Wembley, they asked the FA to shorten the pitch. The FA, very offended by the sacrilegious suggestion, said no, which in fairness could have actually benefited Tottenham because when they moved into their shiny new stadium, the pitch was exactly the same size as Wembley's. Today, Forest pitch at the City Ground is a big one. It's 2 metres wider than any other pitch in the Premier League. But the smallest of all, Craven Cottage, just 100 metres long and 65 wide. No excuse for not tracking your man. There are a couple of crazy outliers in Europe too. At Napoli's home ground, the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona, the pitch is a whopping 110 metres long. At least they don't play on a slope like Newcastle do. There's a 2-metre incline on the pitch at St James's Park. And don't get me started on the old pitch at Yeovil too. It used to be a slant of 2 metres corner to corner and across the halfway line. So UEFA have their standards. So do the FA, but they do give pitches in England some wiggle room. Pitches can be anywhere between 90 and 120 metres long and between 45 and 90 metres wide. I mean, the rules state you can't have a square pitch, but in theory you could have one that's 91 metres long and 90 wide. Imagine rocking up to play a Sunday League game and the pitch is basically a square. So there are rules and regulations on sizes, with a UEFA standard that roughly everyone follows. But as we all know, size doesn't matter, does it?
Johnson plays it through. Smolix is onside. Smolix hits it through the legs of Edison, and it's in. What a start for Ipswich Town.
It's going to be tough. I think we're going to be, made to work for every single point.
Goes right to Harmer into the penalty area, shooting and scoring. A lightning break from Sheffield United.
Wrexham able to build from that. Ollie Rappo, edge of the area, right-footed shot, and a screamer to open the scoring at the racecourse ground.
The ball inside the area, and Stansfield does it again. And Birmingham City have turned this around, and they lead.
Well, I want these players to know they have all the support they need for them to go out there and accomplish their goals.
And then Downs! And Flynn Downs has driven in the equaliser, and Southampton have come up with the equalising goal. Gets the cross in left-footed, Radoni! Coventry lead! Comes back to Ayew, hits it well! Hits it into the bottom corner! 2-0 to Leicester City.
Yeah, we cannot wait. The Championship season gets underway Friday night, and of course it's live exclusively here on talkSPORT. Newly promoted Birmingham against newly relegated Ipswich, presented by Adrian Durham, talkSPORT's voice of football. Can't wait for that. And delighted to say now joining us is former Luton, Ipswich and Swindon Town striker, now turned EFL expert. It's Sam Pargin. How you doing, Sam?
Really good, guys. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. Can't wait for the Championship. Feel like, I know we've had the Club World Cup and I got into it a little bit, but it's all about domestic football. So I'm well revved up for this one. I mean, let's start with that season opener. I think it's a fascinating game because you typically think that, look, Ipswich, I'm sure, are one of the favourites, but you would always think, yeah, Ipswich would definitely be a side just coming up from League One. But it's sort of different gravy with Birmingham. There seems to be this now huge momentum because of the promotion last season, the investment, Tom Brady being involved. How do you see this one playing out? Surely it's going to be tougher than you would normally expect for a side just relegated from the Premier League.
Oh, of course. I mean, they were a League One side only by stature last year, if that makes any sense. This was a well-oiled machine in the third tier last season. They will step up with no problems whatsoever. A lot of people tipping them to be around the playoff places, and I would completely concur with that. They've got some joined-up thinking all of a sudden. For so many years, Birmingham's been a tough watch, I think, under various managers, various guises, but all of a sudden they've made some really good decisions. Chris Davies looks to be an excellent manager, splashing the cash. And I think the other element as well to put into Friday night, let's not get away from how intimidating St Andrews can be at the best of times, back in the day when the stadium was falling apart. So now with a new lick of paint, it looks a hell of a lot more glossy, but this is a vociferous home crowd. Opening night, it's toss of a coin, really. Ipswich have got real squad depth and quality, but Birmingham are probably going to challenge this season. So it's a perfect game to kick off the Championship. Let's hope it's better than Luton Wimbledon was last Friday.
Sam, it feels like all eyes are on Wrexham, doesn't it? Everybody's talking about them. They really do feel like they are the en vogue team. How do you feel like they're going to get on? They've signed Josh Windass, haven't they? It feels like a good signing. How do you anticipate their season going? Is there a chance that we're going to be talking about Wrexham come the end of the season?
I'd fancy Birmingham right now to finish higher than Wrexham. I don't know. It's very different styles, very different approaches. They're very robust. Wrexham, if you haven't seen them or people who listen haven't seen them, very reliant on set pieces in the early years under Phil Parkinson. Had a long throw, Ben Tozer for many a years, and that will be, I'm sure, replicated by someone else as they step up to the second tier. But of course, as they go up the ladder, they're improving the playing squad. The likes of Windus, as you mentioned, Kiefer Moore coming in. They're signing some big names. Connor Cody would suggest that it's probably still going to be a back three with him in the middle, protected. What they did last year, they really improved defensively. They, even in successful seasons, even in promotion seasons, they'd let in too many goals. So that always surprised me, because Phil Parkinson's teams generally historically have been really watertight defensively, and him as a player as well, the way his teams were. So they improved that element last year. They'll have the surprise factor to a degree, but yeah, I don't see them being as strong as Birmingham. That's my hunch, despite obviously the wealth of experience and quality they've brought in. I think the style thing ultimately, listen, I think it may take some scalps, but I think to get promoted, it might just hold them back and need a year of consolidation.
Yeah. Now, we talk about Wrexham, Sam, we talk about Birmingham in such positive fashion because there's this almost fairy tale story. They've been taken over by very famous Hollywood actors, you know, what is it, 5-time or 7-time Super Bowl winner Tom Brady. And that's turned out to be a really good model for these clubs that need a total rebuild. And so we're talking really positively about those clubs. But then on the other hand, we have to mention Sheffield Wednesday and the absolute debacle that is going on at the club, and the way that it's been run by Dejphon Chansiri. The North Stand's been closed. Players haven't been paid. Players have been leaving. It feels like the only sort of silver lining for them is that the now club legend Barry Bannon has stuck with them through this. I mean, we'll get on to predictions in a moment, but for me, sadly, I find it hard to see them anything other than a relegated club next year.
Yeah, I think each year there's normally a couple of cases of this or akin to this, teams that are struggling, points deficits, transfer embargoes. Unfortunately for the Sheffield Wednesday fans, I'll sound like a broken record with that type of terminology, because it's not just this summer, it's been going on for a number of years. And yeah, having been a lower league player myself, when Bury went out of business, I just couldn't fathom that, really, having played at Gigg Lane for many a time. So for a side like Sheffield Wednesday to be encountering these difficulties is just incredible. It's difficult to even think about football and to think about what type of team they're going to put out, because I think if there's the prospect of the team recovering, the club recovering, then of course that siege mentality can kind of take over for the players and the supporters. I think the concern is so great right now that, you know, the results are secondary. Hopefully they can get a team out. Hopefully the ownership can be sorted and they can look forward to a bright future. At the moment, you know, I'm not even thinking of how they're going to fare in the league, because they're going to obviously take a few batterings, you would imagine, in the first few weeks until they can get some senior players into Hillsborough and into the training ground.
I mean, Rory, there's even been talk that the players might boycott that first game because of what's been going on. They've not been paid recently. But my question to you is, when you see clubs like Wrexham being taken over, surely there is an owner, there is someone somewhere that looks at Sheffield Wednesday and the history that they've got and the stadium that they've got and the fan base that they've got and the Sheffield rivalry and think, I'm going to invest in that.
Yeah, it really is a true sleeping giant. Like it's certainly in the top 2 biggest clubs in Yorkshire. When you think about the stature of what that means, when you think about the history of Sheffield Wednesday, like anybody my age will remember Sheffield Wednesday being in the 2 domestic cup finals the same season. They played Arsenal in both cup finals. Like, true icons have played for Sheffield Wednesday, and it's a travesty to see them in this state. I empathise with the players, though.
Yeah.
You really have to hope that they find their feet, because it's going to be a very, very tricky season ahead. That's for sure. Sam, I'm hoping, like most Chelsea fans, like all Chelsea fans, in fact, that Coventry are going to have a good season this year. How do you anticipate them getting on this season?
Yeah, with Fancy and Rory, I think, you know, even though the way that they lost in the playoffs, the incredible heartache of losing that goal in the last seconds up at Sunderland, I don't think that will scar them too much. Normally you talk of the hangover, and I certainly suffered it in my career coming back after playoff defeat. But I think they did well to get in that position, in truth. Such was their second half to the season. I think they've got the squad in place. They've got the potency in terms of a really good array of attackers who are, I think, relatively experienced now in the Championship, which they maybe didn't have 12 months ago. And Lampard obviously had that one season at Derby and got them to the playoff final. So I think for continuity, for strength of squad depth, it's all there, really. So I would put them probably right up there with the 3 relegated sides and Sheffield United, those kind of 5. There's no one, I think it's a pretty open league, but there's no one I would, maybe anticipate having enough to put those 5 under pressure for the automatic positions.
In terms of, I'm going to have to hold you to something here, Sam. Right? I want something concrete. Who, if you had to put your money on the 2 clubs to get automatic, who would you say? Automatic promotion from the Championship?
Well, I'd have Ipswich, my old club. I just think the manager, I spoke about continuity there. Obviously, the other 2 have changed. Cifuentes and Will Steele, obviously, and at Leicester and Southampton, respectively. And I just think there's so many unknowns at this stage of the season. I remember being at Home Park for talkSPORT a few years ago, speaking to the Southampton staff after they just come down, and they didn't know what lads were going to be on the training ground from day to day. And I think that's the reality of the August transfer window. So I think Ipswich probably have accumulated a squad good enough, even if there's a few departures now, and the manager's top quality. Let's not forget that, Chelsea, Manchester United, Brighton, various others were heavily linked to him a year ago. So I'd have Ipswich. And I'd take Leicester. And obviously there's a huge caveat. We don't know if there's going to be a punishment, but if that's relatively gentle, then I'd expect Leicester, with the nucleus of that Championship winning side still there, to have enough.
And there's so many other clubs, massive clubs, sort of successful clubs that you haven't mentioned. So who are you for the playoffs?
For the playoffs, I really like Coventry. And I think you have to have Southampton and Sheffield United in there, pure depth again, parachute money, plethora of good players still left at Sheffield United, despite obviously Chris Wilder leaving. That's a little bit of an unknown. Ruben Sellers has done a brilliant job at 2 troubled clubs. Now he's got a little bit of sound footing. Let's see how he gets on. And probably my one curveball, maybe I'd put in big club and great pedigree in the Championship. I go in with Norwich, even though they've changed a lot with Liam Manning coming in. New director of football in Ben Napper, been in about 12 months. New ownership, still the same kind of model of the last few years. A lot of players coming from different European leagues, young lads, so maybe a little bit of a bedding in period. But quite fancy Norwich to go well under Liam Manning, who's a Norwich boy. Yeah, so that's quite a nice story kicking off there.
Yeah, exciting times, I think, for Norwich. And then finally, I know we're ending on a negative here. We've been speaking about Sheffield Wednesday, but who do you think are your favourites to go down from the Championship? I mean, are Sheffield Wednesday a part of that group?
Yeah, well, I think as we see it tonight, Sheffield Wednesday have to be the obvious one. I think Hull City as well, given the uncertainty at managerial. Well, they got a new manager in, but an unknown quantity, and made a few bad decisions last few years, stayed up by skin of their teeth. So it would be them, and then a bunch of teams. I think that second season for Oxford and Portsmouth for 2, how do they, surprise element last year, the freshness, the motivation that the first season for many a year in the Championship brings. How do they react? I've got an inkling that Swansea may struggle, but I think right now, right here, probably go for Preston, the way that they fell off back end of last season, despite Paul Heckingbottom obviously having a hell of a lot of experience and a lot about him. I just think Preston's squad could be trouble for them.
Sam, absolutely brilliant stuff, mate. Really appreciate you coming on. Of course, we'll be bringing you the opening game of the Championship, Birmingham against Ipswich, live exclusively on talkSPORT Friday night. Just a reminder that Andy Goldstein is playing in that Whirlpool Championship game. I mean, he is in the losers pool of the tournament, but he's 4-1 up is the Gale Force. He's in full flow. If you want to watch that, head over to our talkSPORT YouTube channel. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes, 18+, begambleaware.org. Next up, Nottingham Forest have had a £35 million bid rejected for Omari Hutchinson. We'll discuss that next. Good evening, how are we? You're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings. We've been covering all the transfer angles this evening, including, of course, that massive news that Benjamin Sesko has seemingly chosen Manchester United over Newcastle. We spoke to Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter. He's convinced that Newcastle still have a plan. We've been thinking about Nicholas Jackson, hearing that Chelsea wants £70 million for him potentially to go to Newcastle. We've been feeling sorry for Newcastle fans. Well, I certainly have done. Rory's got a little bit less sympathy. But we're going to turn our attention now to some news that has been breaking during the show this evening. And this is regarding the fact that Ipswich Town have rejected a bid from Nottingham Forest for Amari Hutchinson. Forest's proposal for the 21-year-old has been rejected. Ipswich believe that he's worth upwards of 35-40 million pounds. Talks are ongoing, and you just got to think that, Rory, in my opinion, I think he's a really good little player. I think he did well for Ipswich, who ultimately got relegated. But 40 million quid for a player at Ipswich Town who've been relegated seems to me to be massively overinflated in this market.
Okay, that's probably true. But I also think he's a very good player. I think he's the kind of player that you need. I think if you are to utilise a formula that served you so well last year, and you think about the loss of Anthony Elanga, I feel like Amari Hutchinson is a good replacement. He's a young replacement. He could go on to some great things. He's very highly regarded. Chelsea rated him highly. He's Premier League proven. He's had a good year in the Premier League. I know what you mean, and I do think that it's a bit of a rip-off. But realistically then, what do you think he's... What would be the fair price?
Well, I think he's a 25 million.
30 million, maybe?
25, 30, yeah.
Yeah.
And look, clubs are always going to be peacocking in the window, aren't they? And they're going to be up in their valuation, settling somewhere in between. I think he's a good player, and I think that he could fit Forest well. But ultimately, we're not necessarily in a position where we desperately need that. We've just signed Dan Ndoye from Bologna, who in his first friendly appearance against Fiorentina looked really tricky. He's got a lot of pace. I think technically with the ball at his feet, he's better than Anthony Elanga. I think he's cut from the same cloth as Callum Hudson-Odoi. And so, yes, I would like to see Amari Hutchinson wear the Garibaldi red, but I don't want my club to be ripped off. And if we're talking, upwards of £40 million is what Ben Jacobs was telling us, that's just absolute madness.
Perhaps, but I feel like you need him. And ultimately, you have to understand from Ipswich's point of view, whether you think he's worth that or not, and we're being very rational about it in the studio, one of Ipswich's best players. Like, if Ipswich are to get out of the Championship, get back to the Premier League, one of the main reasons why they'll be able to do that is Amari Hutchinson. So he's worth $40 million to them. You also have to remember that I think Chelsea have a 25% selling fee,
and we've been stung by that with Anthony Elanga as well.
Yeah,
and it looked like we were going to be stung by that with Morgan Gibbs-White until Evangelos Marinakis came to the rescue and kept our best player at our team, which, by the way, feels like a new signing.
Yeah. So what Ipswich are trying to do is they're trying to just pass on the 25%. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the fee that they believe the player is worth and pass a 25% fee that they're going to have to pay Chelsea onto the buyer. So look, I think overall you're right. Amari Hutchinson is being slightly overpriced here, but I think Nottingham Forest need him, don't you?
We need to add depth. The thing that Forest need this season is, I think both things are true. Forest were knackered at the end of the last season. That FA Cup run, I think, didn't help ultimately because we dropped out of those Champions League places and only scraped into the Conference League by the skin of our teeth. And because of some mismanagement by Steve Parish at the very top of Palace, we now find ourselves, as it stands, in the Europa League, which, by the way, I don't like. I think Palace fans deserve to see their club in the Europa League. But as it stands, that's where we are. We need strength in depth. We need a much deeper squad.
And Amari Hutchinson is part of that.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, Max, imagine if Amari Hutchinson goes on to become the player that he might, unlikely but might, a mainstay of the England team. Suddenly, he looks a bargain at 40 million. Suddenly, he's worth 100 million.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And playing, Thursday, Sunday in whatever European competition it is, we're going to need that.
Are you feeling good overall? You know, we're going into the new season. You've obviously had the Mr. Marinakis issue hanging over you. You've obviously had this.
What issue?
He
kept Morgan Gibbs-White at the club. There's absolutely no issue whatsoever.
It's headlines, though, isn't it? It's headlines regarding your chairman. It's headlines that perhaps you didn't need. You've also had this very distracting saga regarding Crystal Palace and the pursuit of Europa League football / Conference League football from them.
I think all of those things, I don't think they impact us.
They've got to be distracting, haven't they?
I don't think it's distracting. I don't think there's anything distracting about your owner ultimately putting Daniel Levy back in his box and keeping your best player at the football club and making him the highest paid player in the club's history. I want my club to be doing that. My club is ambitious and so is the owner. That's great for football. If other fans don't like it, crack on, I don't care. Forest are playing European football for the first time in 30 years, and we've got an owner that is passionate and is backing us. So I think that's good headlines. The Crystal Palace stuff, ultimately I think it's become unsavoury, particularly on social media. But I think the fact that Palace fans are lambasting the owner of another football club who wasn't in charge of their football club, who missed a deadline, didn't check their emails, and have found themselves in this mess. I don't think that's anything to do with Nottingham Forest. I think that's to do with issues at another football club. So I think it's gone from what looked like to be a Newcastle-esque summer, an absolute clanger with Hudson Elanga leaving and then potentially Morgan Gibbs-White, and it's been salvaged. And now it feels like we're on the up. We've kept Morgan Gibbs-White. We've signed Dan Ndoye. I'd love to see Amari Hutchinson wear the red.
And then we're quite interesting here, and I do love it. We've had a glimpse of this earlier. You know, when we were talking to the Newcastle fan who sort of told us that everything was fine and it's all going exactly to plan. I feel like you might have done a little bit of that there, because from the outside looking in, I'm sure that most people listening to this, listening to you, a Forest fan, talking in a fairly positive way about Forest summer, I'm pretty sure that the general consensus of football fans is that it has been a really bad summer for Forest. It's been distracting. It's been unedifying. There's been moments that have been so peculiar. And ultimately, this summer, off the back of the euphoria of qualifying for Europe, getting Nottingham Forest not only back into the Premier League and establishing the Premier League, but getting a European great back into Europe, I feel like that euphoria has totally dissipated, and it has just been bonkers is the word.
Rory, mate, if it's dissipated for fans of other football clubs who cares? It certainly hasn't for Forest fans. Now, what I will say is I'm not saying it's going to be a breeze next season, and I would say off the bat, I don't think that Forest are going to finish 7th next season. I think it's going to be really challenging to be playing European football. That's why we need the likes of Amari Hutchinson to come in and to add that depth, to add that sort of solidity that we're going to need. But nobody can take away the enthusiasm that we get to do what our fathers and sometimes grandfathers did, following Mighty Reds in Europe. And so I'm excited about that. But what I would take a 12th place finish and a European final.
What do you think of this prediction? I'm not saying that it is my prediction, but
then don't predict it.
What do you think of this theory then? Nottingham Forest are in the relegation battle until the end of the season.
I think you've lost your mind.
You really?
Yeah.
See, I don't think
because I think there is a huge gap between 12th, 13th, and then those bottom three. And we've seen that traditionally in the past few years. You look at the amount of points that clubs need to stay up; it's much lower. And with Callum Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, Chris Wood, Igor Jesus, who scored against PSG in the Club World Cup, the defence that we've got, Milenkovic and Murillo, Ola Aina, Nico Williams, you can't tell me, Rory, with a straight face, that defence is going to find themselves in a relegation dogfight.
I don't think you go down, but I think you're going to have a terrible season. I really do.
So what's terrible? If you don't think it's a relegation fight, what's terrible for Forest?
Something around 14th, 15th, maybe the threat of relegation.
I completely disagree. And I think that if you're seriously telling me that Murillo and Milenkovic at the back and Matt Sells in the middle of our goal is going to be in a relegation fight or even in 15th, I don't think you understand
unbelievably well. It was a purple patch like no
other
went
for
well
Chris
because
Wood.
of the
players that we signed and the manager that we've got. And we've still got all of those players apart from Anthony Elanga, and we've replaced him, and it looks like we're going to try and replace him with another player.
Absolutely, but Chris Wood won't have a season like that again. No way. You've lost Anthony Elanga, who was integral to it. I feel like Morgan Gibbs-White's the distraction and the weird press conference is going to have an impact. We've seen Nuno Espirito Santo take teams to like Wolverhampton Wanderers into a really positive place, and then it go wrong. Perhaps I'm wrong here, which is very, very possible.
Well, you are wrong, as you often are.
Often, more often than not. But I can see a world where Forest have a pitiful season and you are in threat of relegation in February, March.
Well, the world that you see is absolute poppycock. Right, you're listening to the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT with Ladbrokes. 18+, begambleaware.org. We'll go through the main stories of the day next. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders with me, Max Scott and Rory Jennings. The Benjamin Sesko saga takes another turn as it looks like he'll be signing for Manchester United and not Newcastle. Craig Hope, the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, will bring us the latest. Rory absolutely loves Jack Grealish, but would he be happy if he went to Everton? I'll be getting his take on that. Nicholas Jackson, will he be a Chelsea player next season? talkSPORT's Ben Jacobs is going to tell us more. And the Liverpool have the best squad in their club's history. That and more. This is the Transfer Insiders on talkSPORT. Right, let's get into it, Rory. And the Benjamin Sesko saga takes another turn. Let's hear it from the Daily Mail's chief football reporter, Craig Hope, on the matter.
Well, where do they go next is a good question, because for the past week or so, all roads have led to Benjamin Sesko. Now, I was out in Singapore and South Korea with the team on their Far East tour, and I think it was a story I broke a week ago that while Newcastle were being linked with Sesko, there was still that fear, that suspicion, that feeling internally that he did prefer a move to Manchester United. I think you always get a feel for a player as a club, and if they're desperate to join you, you know it's got a real chance of happening. If there's a lukewarm feel on the part of the agent, I think you've always got that fear that you could be being strung along to smoke out somebody else. Now, Manchester United, as soon as we were made aware of their interest, I think there was a feeling amongst us guys out in the Far East, he would end up there. Nonetheless, Manchester United's offer wasn't forthcoming. Newcastle was still being given encouragement from Sesko's camp, none more so than on Monday when they were told he was open to join them. So after that, it was all stations go, and they put everything into accelerating, agreeing that fee with RB Leipzig. What then happened on Tuesday morning? Manchester United formalised their offer, to no one's surprise, really. And given everything we'd heard previously, it is now looking likely that he will join Manchester United. But to go back and answer your question, where do Newcastle go from here? Well, Sesko wasn't being brought in to come along and play alongside Alexander Isak. He was going to be coming in, if they could have made it happen, to be Isak's replacement. So it does two things now. It delays Alexander Isak's potential move to Liverpool. It also leaves Newcastle without a centre forward going into the start of the season, because Alexander Isak today has been excluded from training. He said he doesn't want to play for Newcastle again. He wants to go to Liverpool. So right now, Newcastle have got no victory at all. They've got a player there who's a very good player, a wonderful player, who doesn't want to be there and wants to go, who they've opened their mind to sell him, which is why they've pursued Sesko, Pedro, Ekitike, the others. But they've got none of them in. So they're in limbo at the moment. They've got to go back to the drawing board.
Rory, you've got to admit, this is absolutely sickening for Newcastle fans. You know, yet again, the list is endless, mate. I mean, Liam Delap, João Pedro, Brian Mbeumo, Mark Gahey, James Trafford. I mean, now Benjamin Sesko, and not to mention their best player wants to leave the club, Alexander Isak.
It's been a disaster.
It's been an absolute disaster. Is there any sympathy in your heart for Newcastle fans?
Yeah, to a degree. To a degree, I do think that it's a shame that they haven't been able to get the players over the line. But I don't think asking about sympathy is necessarily, it's neither here nor there. There has to be a question as to why they haven't been able to get these players over the line.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think that it certainly tells us something about the allure of the club. Like, Newcastle fans will tell us that Newcastle are a great club to play for and everybody wants to play for them and they're a wonderful, wonderful club with rich history and rich heritage. But the truth is, Benjamin Sesko wants to sign for a Manchester United team that at various points have looked in disarray, and a Manchester United team who are not in the Champions League. I think that tells us not only a little bit about Newcastle United, but it tells us about Manchester United. It tells us that regardless of what's going on the pitch, regardless of what we think of Ruben Amorim, regardless of what you think of the running of the club and Ineos and whatever else, they are still the great Manchester United. They still have the sway, the pull, the allure, and following in the footsteps of some of the greats that have played for that club still matters to modern-day footballers.
No one can deny that. Very few people other than Newcastle fans, because we all think our club's the best club in the world. That's what tribalism is. That's what proper support is. But unless you're a Newcastle fan, of course everyone admits Manchester United is still a bigger club. But he is deciding to play for a football club who their own manager has said last season they were the worst in the club's history. He's choosing Manchester United over Champions League football. And so I guess there has to be a level of what on earth is going on at the top of the football club? Because it seems to me, Rory, that since Amanda Staveley left the club, it's been rudderless. It's been directionless. And the only person that's keeping them afloat is Eddie Howe, who in this absolute chaos of a summer for me, has stood out as a little bit of a shining light. Like the fact that he said to Alexander Isak today, "You're not training with the first team squad."
Yeah,
because you got to earn that.
Eddie Howe is an excellent manager. I would make no bones about that. I think Eddie Howe is a better manager than Ruben Amorim. I think Eddie Howe is more inspirational than Ruben Amorim.
Well, yeah, but every time you hear Ruben Amorim talk about his club, he seems to be lambasting his own players.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of talking himself out of a job at various points. But there is something going on at Newcastle that's a slight worry, because so many players have opted out of the project. So many players have decided that it isn't the opportunity for them. And now the jewel in the crown has decided that he doesn't want to play for them anymore. I feel like Newcastle actually need to make a stand. I feel like Newcastle need to make a stand and say that he cannot leave, regardless. But I feel like what they're going to try and do is sign somebody to replace Alexander Isak. They tried to sign Sesko. It didn't go their way. They tried to sign Ekitike. It didn't go their way. They tried to sign Liam Delap, João Pedro. It didn't go their way. They now have to get somebody over the line.
Off the top of your head, who is the best player that Newcastle can get to replace Alexander Isak? And granted, they won't be as good as him, but there aren't many as good as him in the world. So realistically, who do you think they should target?
My opinion on this is something that has been mentioned before, and I was totally ridiculed. But I think the player they should sign would be Darwin Núñez. But it looks like, and we've understood from Ben Jacobs at talkSPORT, that Darwin Núñez is just dotting the I's and crossing the T's away from joining the Saudi Pro League.
Yeah.
So it looks like that isn't realistic. But if it were a realistic opportunity, I think Darwin Núñez would be an excellent player on Tyneside. I really do. Now, looking at it through the lens of reality and the cards that have been dealt at the moment, I mean, it's looking like Nicholas Jackson, isn't it? It's looking like they're going to sign Nicholas Jackson from us, from Chelsea.
Who you've said is never going to be a great player. So that's not going to fill the Gallagate with much enthusiasm, right?
In my opinion, no. In my opinion, he isn't a particularly good player. There's a job that he can do for the team. There's a world in which Nicholas Jackson can compete and can certainly be part of something that Eddie Howe is building. And let's also remember that Eddie Howe is a very good manager who has the opportunity and the ability of sprinkling stardust on players, elevating the performances of players, turning players from good players into great players. Eddie Howe can do that. And maybe he can work his magic on Jackson. But I would also have to acknowledge that Nicholas Jackson is one of the most wasteful strikers I've ever seen play football. And it isn't just missing chances.
Yeah.
It's missing sitters. Yeah. Sitter after sitter after sitter. And then he's got major disciplinary problems as well. Gets sent off at crucial moments in the season, crucial games in the Club World Cup. And ultimately, I'll be pleased when he leaves Chelsea. Can he do a job for Newcastle? I think he can do a job, but I would say that he's more of a Callum Wilson replacement than a Alexander Isak replacement.
Yeah, it's been a difficult summer for Newcastle without a shadow of a doubt. And a player who's had a difficult time of it recently is Jack Grealish, Rory. talkSPORT understands that obviously it's been widely reported that Everton are interested in a loan move for Jack Grealish, but talkSPORT understands that ultimately Manchester City want the signing club to pay all of his wages, which are believed to be in and around £300,000 a week. You would think that that isn't something that Everton can afford. What do you make of the whole Jack Grealish to Everton situation? Do you think that that is the place where he needs to go to be banging on Thomas Tuchel's door for a place on that flight to America for the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jack Grealish should definitely be in Thomas Tuchel's plans, and if he isn't, he can certainly change that over the next 9 months.
Is Everton the club for him to do that?
Potentially, yeah, because Jack Grealish is a wonderful football player, and I think that he will demonstrate his brilliance regardless of where he is. I think that he could have potentially been a little bit more aspirational about the club that he went to.
Maybe he was.
Maybe he was.
It's just not landed. I mean, there were talks about a move to Italy, AC Milan, Napoli. You think, looking at what's happened to Scott McTominay there, that would be a great place for him to go. But Everton, it seems to be at the minute.
Look, Jack Grealish is fortunate in one way, that he plays in a position that is very much up for grabs in the England team. Like, you know, if you were say you're a really good right winger, in the way that Jared Bowen is a really good right winger, it's almost irrelevant what season you have because you're not going to be better than Bukayo Saka.
Yeah.
If you're a really good centre forward, you're probably not going to get in the team because Harry Kane's going to be better than you, whatever you do this season. Whereas if you are a left winger in the way that Jack Grealish is, it's a position in the team
that's
that
my
is
problem,
totally
though.
up
He's
for
not
grabs.
a left winger. He's been made to become a left winger, which I think he is, as a result, because he's been put on the wing, I think it's become much less enjoyable to watch Jack Grealish play. And I think that fans will look back on his career and be like, you should have been a 10 like you were at Villa. You should have been allowed to float and do your thing. And he's not been able to do that. Yes, at the expense of winning a treble with Manchester City and being part of Pep Guardiola's famous team. but I don't think ultimately his natural position is a left winger. I'd like to see him fight for a place where Cole Palmer's playing, you know, in and around sort of behind the striker.
But in a way, look, I think I do agree with you at some point, but the position that Jack Grealish has been occupying for the most recent patch of his career has been that left channel. And that is good because it's a position that he could get into the England side with. Like he's competing with who? Anthony Gordon. I think he's a better player than Gordon.
Maybe Marcus Rashford.
Maybe Marcus Rashford. If
Eberichiez has been
exactly. But Jack Grealish is capable of making that position his own.
Yeah.
And I would love him to do it because I think he's a wonderful player. I think he's a great bloke. I think he's a great representation of modern day football, and I wish him nothing but success.
I agree, and I want someone like Jack Grealish wearing the Three Lions, representing England at the World Cup, because I think that he's the type of player that I think this country should be proud that they have produced. Right, next up, we're going to discuss Nicholas Jackson and the Liverpool currently, or if they get Alexander Isak especially, have the best squad in their history. You're listening to the Transfer Insiders with me, Max Scott, alongside Rory Jennings. Now, it's absolutely blockbuster stuff in the Whirlpool Championships. Andy Goldstein, he's gone 5-4 up against Evan Wagner. He's just won the final, or that fifth frame, and it looked like he had the yips. It looked like he was losing his mettle. But fair play to the Goldstein. What's it? The Gold Force? What is he? The Gale Force. That's it. He's not a household name just yet when it comes to pool. Well, he's not a household name anyway. But yeah, the Gale Force is fair play to him. He's brought it back. He's asserted a bit of authority there. and it's 5-4 up against, as I say, the well-known Evan Wagner or Wagner. You can watch that on the talkSPORT YouTube channel. Right, Rory and I are going to turn our attention to Nicholas Jackson, who, for my money, seems to be completely and utterly surplus to requirements at Chelsea. And our reporter Ben Jacobs gave us the very latest on the Chelsea forward.
Yeah, I think Nicholas Jackson and Newcastle could move. There were actually some initial talks even before the Šeško saga manifested as it did. There's an element, I think, here of plausible deniability from Chelsea's point of view, because if they are to sell Jackson for the right price, then it may suit all parties. But if he ends up staying at Chelsea, I think the last thing they want is to knock his confidence, especially after the 2 red cards against Newcastle and at the Club World Cup, to make the player feel that they were ever trying to force him out. So we have this slight paradox of Chelsea value Jackson, Chelsea are content if Jackson stays, and yet all signs point to the fact that they're actively exploring an exit, and right now he's more likely to go. And then I think you see João Pedro go at 9 with Liam Delap. If Xavi Simons comes in, he plays behind in the Nkunku role, and Chelsea's attack starts to take shape. So my read at the moment is there's a long time in this window left, and it remains more likely that Jackson departs. Then where? Newcastle could be one option post-Šeško. We know that Aston Villa hold an interest too. Milan have made some inquiries, but they feel he's too expensive. And it will all come down to what the price is or what kind of structure Chelsea might entertain. We've heard suggestions from sources, and I've spoken directly to people that have backed this up, that Nicholas Jackson is £80 million. But I think the perspective of the suitors is that it might come down to more like Mbumo money, which would still be a good amount for Chelsea. It would still be affordable for a club like Newcastle, who have put that kind of money down on Benjamin Šeško. So price is going to be key to all of this, because I think at 80, and some have even said throughout the window 100, Nicholas Jackson wouldn't go anywhere within that bracket, because I don't think Newcastle or Villa would do that deal or even be able to. But if the price drops below 80 and closer to 65 or 70, I think Newcastle and even Aston Villa might bite.
talkSPORT's Ben Jacobs bringing us the very latest regarding Nicholas Jackson. Rory, it is just indicative of the world that we live in that Nicholas Jackson is being spoken in the same sentence as £100 million fee, or even between 70 and 80. Isn't that? Is it just me, or is that absolute madness?
Yeah, it's complete and utter madness. I mean, Nicholas Jackson is a fairly good Premier League player that can do a job for a Premier League team. Like, he is no better than that. £80 million, you're talking about what I consider to be the creme de la creme. But I feel like 80 million puts you in like a very serious price bracket.
Yeah.
And it means that you should be delivering very serious product. And he doesn't do that. He is fine. He is a run-of-the-mill good Premier League player. He's no better than...
I think he can be an absolute nuisance for defences. I think, if...
And his own team and his own fans.
Well, yeah, he's got a poor disciplinary record. But if someone like Eddie Howe got hold of him, I think that ultimately Nicholas Jackson would improve as a player. I think he can be an asset to a side. And so I don't want this to be too critical of Jackson. But ultimately, the fact that Chelsea think they can get between 70 and 80 million for him, I think is absolutely crazy. But if there's anything that Chelsea have shown in what has been, until recently, a pretty disappointing time for the club, they know how to sell players.
Yeah.
They know how to extract them, more than probably than those players are worth.
Well, this is the point, and it's also very important to have a good transfer window, that you get that revolving door moving.
Yeah.
Like, whenever we talk about transfer windows, we always focus on who signed who. Who have we signed? Who are we bringing in? Sometimes the most important part of a transfer window is that revolving door, making sure that you get rid of the players at the right time. Manchester United, people want to talk about Mbermo, people want to talk about Cunha. Manchester United, if they get rid of Malacia, Garnacho, Rashford, Sancho, that's a better window than if they didn't sign anyone. Just making sure that you get rid of players at the right time. So look, we've done very well here. And if we've somehow managed to gaslight the world into believing that Nicholas Jackson is an £80 million player, and someone is ready to pay £80 million for Nicholas Jackson, then that's fantastic news. But he is... I don't know how else I can phrase this. Through on goal, there is possibly not a more wasteful finisher in the Premier League than Nicholas Jackson. Making the wrong choice in front of goal, playing the ball to feet when it needs to go to space, playing it to space when it needs to go to feet. Look, he can do a job. There are moments where he can be excellent, and he can certainly contribute to a team. But if you think that you're going to build a front line around Nicholas Jackson, then either Eddie Howe can literally turn water into wine, or this is drastically overpriced and isn't going to work.
Yeah, I think if we see Nicholas Jackson leave Chelsea for, I don't know, £70 million even, I think it's, absolute daylight robbery from the Blues. But as a Chelsea fan, I'm sure you'd be absolutely loving that, see what the club can reinvest that into. Now, to finish, Rory, I want to get your take on this because Liverpool legend Mark Lawrenson joined the breakfast show this morning. He said, if Liverpool get Alexander Isak, it's the best squad in their history. Mark Lawrenson won 5 league titles for Liverpool. He won a European Cup for Liverpool, and he's willing to say that it would be the best squad in the club's history. Do you agree with that?
I actually don't, and I think it's a great squad. I think that there are some marquee players, and maybe in terms of like statement names, it's huge, it's right up there. But I don't necessarily think this has the balance that it needs to be considered the best squad. For example, I heard Arne Slot talking about Ryan Gravenberch having the properties and capability of playing at centre-half. I heard him talking about Endo having the properties and capabilities of playing at centre-half. They've got one fit centre-half going into a season that starts.
I think the fact that he's saying that exposes the fact that that's him already trying to come up with an answer.
And maybe pressure the board to go and sign Gahey now.
Exactly.
But no, because of the lack of balance, because of the lack of midfield options, because of the lack of cover at centre-half, I don't think it's the best squad. And interestingly, we got a text about this, didn't we, earlier, which I thought was a great text that really told the story. I think we was talking about it as where it ranks in the pantheon of great Liverpool squads. And Mark Lawrenson has obviously made the case that it is the best. And we got a text that basically said Clements, Hansen, Souness, Dalglish, Rush is a far better spine if you compare it to the spine that they've got now.
Yeah.
And when you say those names, it goes, that's icon after icon after icon, isn't it? Depth galore.
Yeah.
And obviously it has the medals to prove it. So I would say no.
And look, Mark Lawrenson, there's not much I can really do to challenge him, but he's an absolute legend. I was brought up listening to him talk about the game, and so I've got so much respect for him. But I think it's a really bold claim to make, considering the fact that I think Arne Slot's got such a massive challenge on his hands. Yes, I do think Liverpool are going to win the league, and yes, I do think they're going to win it easily. But ultimately, Arne Slot's got a brand new challenge on his hands. I think what he did to take Jurgen Klopp's team and make them into title winners was absolutely astonishing, and fair play to him. I doff my cap to him. But he's got a new challenge here, because if he gets Alexander Isak in, who is the main man in that Liverpool squad? We've seen how difficult it's been at Real Madrid for them to sort of ingratiate the likes of Kylian Mbappe with Jude Bellingham, with Rodrigo, with Vinicius Jr. And I think that is going to be the big challenge that Arne Slot and Liverpool face. And I just wonder whether the transition, Rory, will be as seamless as we think if Alexander Isak joins Liverpool, because they've lost Luis Diaz. Who's going to fill that space?
What they do have, though, they have the manager that is capable of making this work. Look, I think Liverpool are going to be fine. My bold prediction for the season is they hit 100 points. I think they equalise the Man City Centurion ridiculously brilliant achievement. Wow. I just don't think, as much as I love hearing from Mark Lawrenson, and like you, it took me back to listening to him sort of wax lyrical about football and match of the day, and it was a joy to behold. With respect, I just think he's wrong on this. I don't think it is even as good as the Liverpool teams that he was part of. So no, I respectfully disagree with Loro.
Yes, and I agree with you there, mate. Rory, it's been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget, you can get Transfer Insiders as a podcast on the talkSPORT app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Up next, it's the Sports Bar with Jason Cundy and Adebayo Akinfenwa. 03717 223344. Get your calls in now.